Good evening. We will be conducting tonight's meeting in person here at City Hall Council Chambers, as well as virtually using Zoom. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting tonight on Wave Channel 18 and online through the city's YouTube channel. If you would like to participate in live public comment via the Zoom platform, please refer to the agenda for instructions. Pastor Vinnie Santinelli from Methodist Church will be giving the invocation this evening, and Mayor Joyner will begin the meeting immediately after the invocation.
Okay, good evening and greetings from the folks at the Lincoln United Methodist Church. My name is Vinnie Santinelli. I'm the pastor, and thank you for the opportunity to open this time and an invocation. Won't you pray with me, please? Lord God, we invite you to preside over this meeting, even in the midst of all the things that are going on in our lives. We pause for a moment to acknowledge you. We also acknowledge you in the midst of the differing opinions, personalities here in this room this evening. Despite that, give us a spirit of unity. Help us to each listen politely as others share their points of view. Help us to work as a unified team in combining our ideas for the greater good. Help us to work as a whole rather than as individuals, trying to promote our own agendas. And may we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and work together on our shared mission. We also ask that you bless our city, and again, that the common good would result from the actions and decisions that occur here in this room this evening. Thank you for the city of Lincoln with all its blessings and the residents who call this place home. May we continue to be a people who work to prosper our community and love our neighbors as ourselves. And bless this great nation that we live in, especially in these polarizing and confusing times. Give us clarity of mind, peace of heart, and the courage to do what is right. For Jesus, your son's sake. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. If I'd have known that was you in the back, I would have welcomed you. So thank you for being here.
All right, we've got 6:01, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for the City of Lincoln regular meeting, City Council, Lincoln Redevelopment Successor Agency, and Lincoln Public Financing Authority. Gwen, roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Andriotta.
Here.
Councilmember Carl Skint.
Here.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Here.
And Mayor Joyner.
Here. Report from closed session. I don't believe we have anything reportable from closed session tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Correct. There is no reportable action.
Pastor, as long as you're here, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
All right, we move on to item 5, agenda modifications. Council have any agenda modification to request? Staff?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We'd like to request that item 8B, which is the City Hall reorganization contract, be pulled from this agenda for be brought back at a future meeting after we're able to do a little bit more research.
Council good with that?
Yes.
Very good. We'll move on to presentations. I see none tonight. We do have a heavy agenda, so that's probably just as well. We'll move on to public comment on non-agendized items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on an item not on our agenda tonight. I'll start with the cards that I have. If you have not filled one out, the blue cards there on the table. Maybe you could fill one out, get it to our city clerk and bring it up front. And if you don't want to do that, there'll still be an opportunity for you to speak. I have one card right now, Amy and Marcelo.
Hello. Thank you for giving us your time. We a lot of us, are the neighborhood of Revere at Independence, a community that is built by Richmond American. We have come before you today to ask for your assistance. It has come to our attention that Richmond American plans to build additional communities within our city of Lincoln while continuing to neglect their contractual warranty agreements on our homes. Many of us are victims of forced closing on incomplete homes with major issues that were missed on inspection. I was able to give the county clerk some photos if you would like to reference those. We have numerous documented warranty items that have gone unfixed as we approach or have gone beyond the 1-year warranty period that the builder gives us. We have been given excuses. We have been lied to. We've had community-wide pleas go unanswered. Meanwhile, the builder and warranty division feel confident remaining on site in our neighborhood, driving by our homes every day with the objective being to continue with their new builds and neglect us. Many of us love our city, our neighborhood, and our neighbors. We had looked forward to the benefits of living in a close-knit community, a smaller town. And we just want that you not allow the emotional trauma and mental stress that this builder has put us through to overshadow the wonderful aspects of being citizens of Lincoln. We are here to offer our stories and ask that Richmond Americans' plans for building further in Lincoln be denied until they find the staff, the timeliness, and the desire to uphold the promises and contractual obligations that they have made to our community first. I'd like to provide a special thanks to Ben Brown, who has assisted to properly organize myself and our community to provide us resources so that we could be here today to present to you. And if there's any questions or demands for accountability to our builder, I would invite you to contact John Bayless. He is Richmond's Americans Division President. His phone number is 916-275-1885. I'm happy to share this information again following the meeting. And I also have collected a signature page of 27 other individuals from our neighborhood that were unable to attend today. And then we have neighbors here who would also like to share some of their experiences if you're able to listen to them.
Can we open up the floor to our neighbors? Okay.
One at a time. And if you wanted to give your signatures to the city clerk, that would be great. Marcella, did you want to say anything?
This is my wife, so I'm here for support for her, but I want to definitely open it up to any of the other neighbors. If not, I will go ahead and share my own testimony. So,
Well, as long as we got you there, why don't we go ahead and start?
all right, well, me and my wife, Amy, we moved to Lincoln about a year ago, and we have 3 sons, and we are definitely happy to be here in Lincoln. And the reason why we came to Lincoln is because we lived in South Sacramento and things have started changing in South Sacramento. So I work for the Department of Corrections. So a lot of my coworkers live in Lincoln and Rockland. So we came, checked it out. Amy's an ICU nurse for Sutter. And she came and checked it out. She said, Marcelo, you know what? Let's check out Lincoln. We did, we loved it. And we went ahead and started our home buying process with Richmond American. And from the very beginning, it seemed like it was just, a very, very good fit. And as soon as they got our money and they started building our home, we started noticing things. We started looking at the frame build quality, and we would bring it to their attention. There were numerous times throughout the building of our home that we brought issues to Richmond American, and they just kind of looked over it. They got the color of our home wrong. They got our tiling wrong. They got our stairwell wrong. And these are just issues that arose just in the building process of our home. And when we finally moved in, it was an ordeal just to get our keys. But when we finally moved in, we started talking to our neighbors, and our neighbors started sharing their stories of what they had been through and what they're currently still going through as far as getting things fixed. And some of these issues that they're bringing up are just, they're overwhelming, to say the least. And it's kind of an ordeal trying to deal with the warranty department with Richmond American. My wife and I chose other ways in which, we got their attention. It seemed like they were more responsive to our attention when, we contacted their Facebook page, or we contacted their Instagram, and we kind of got our issues heard that way. But in talking to the community, there are other neighbors that we have that didn't use those tactics, and they're still dealing with their own problems. So at this particular point, we're not interested in a class action lawsuit. We're not doing any of that. All we want is just our voices to be heard, right? A lot of us in our community, and tell me if I'm ever going over my time, a lot of us in our community serve our community. My wife being a nurse, me being in law enforcement, and there are countless other neighbors that do that type of work. And so we know what it's like to work hard and want to come home to something nice. We know what it's like to have integrity and stand behind what we stand for with morals and values. And all we want is for Richmond American to do the exact same thing. You know, these homes were not cheap by any means. So we just want them to do what they promised us, which is to have a wonderful home for us to raise our families in. Thank you for your time.
Understood. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on an item not on the agenda tonight? Sounds like there are a number of you that want to speak on this topic. Please feel free to come to the podium.
Hi, I'm Sarah Wheeler. We bought a home. We closed in January after a very, very long process. We caught a lot of their mistakes in the process, just like they did. My son's window was completely crooked. We had bedrooms framed wrong, all kinds of stuff. So we're still dealing with they replaced our shower glass and it's not sealed in now and we can use it carefully. While it's unsealed and we have holes in our tile, our front door won't lock and shut anymore. So we're having to hold our door shut and deadbolt it in order to keep it shut and people out. They've ignored, gosh, I've been getting a hold of the warranty guy. We had somebody that took care of it for about a month and now they ignore every single email, because they're moved on to who knows what else. We just want our home done. I want to not have to take off of work anymore and wait for them to come fix things. They patched stucco in our front of the house and now we have gray patches everywhere that just sit there and look nice and cute. So they told us our concrete, when we told them concrete was all rough and rigid, they were like, well, that's just the quality of work you get these days. And so it's hard. We paid a lot of money and we worked very hard and waited a long time. And it's just a very emotionally draining experience for them. So we just want it done. We want them to do what they said they're going to do. And we want them to be held accountable and not do this to other people. So thank you.
I'm going to toss it to Councilmember Andreotta, whose district this project is within, and we've had some contact with the builders.
So I was contacted by one of your neighbors with this issue a little while ago. And I was very concerned. I brought it to the attention of the city manager. And before we could actually take steps to address it further and more seriously, we did get an email from John Bayless. And so I'm going to read that email to you just so you understand the communication that we got. It may not make you feel better. I'm just going to read it so you understand his words and then I'll make some comments. So this email was to Mayor Joyner, myself, and Sean. He says, I wanted to give you a heads up that we are hearing rumblings that 8 or more families from our above referenced community in Lincoln may show up at your city council this evening to voice their displeasure with the experience with Richmond American during public comment. Issues relayed primarily to warranty items on their home that have not been completed, missed appointments, and poor communication. Unfortunately, many of their claims are valid. Richmond American had their division president resign, who was managing the Sacramento division based in Roseville. I was managing Richmond's Bay Area division and was asked initially to take over management of the Sacramento division. Shortly thereafter, Richmond made the decision to merge the two divisions into one, and it has been a rather bumpy merger. We had significant turnover and staffing reductions as we merged, and we have certainly struggled getting correct practices implemented and correct personnel at some of our communities, including Revere, as we delivered 970 homes in the merged divisions last year. Due to the merger needs, I've moved my primary office to operate out of Roseville. We do remain committed to serving our customers. Unfortunately, the volume of outstanding warranty items is not allowing us to do so on the timeline we strive for and the timeline our customers deserve. We continue to take warranty requests via our website, and they give the link. This submittal process allows us to document each request in writing, get it into our warranty management system, and get a work ticket made and assigned out to a home care representative for inspection and resolution. Additionally, we have hired a new senior home care representative to help service Revere. If there are warranty items that have been submitted through our website and either no contact has been made or the request is still outstanding more than 30 days, Jerry Dickens can be contacted via email to assist with the following matter, and he gave Jerry Dickens' email. Again, we apologize to our customers for the slow service, but remain committed to to reach resolution on all matters regards John D. Bayless. So although that sounds really great, I'm sure it doesn't make you feel any better because it sounds like it's been a horrific experience for you. So what we are doing is we will contact them again. We will talk to them personally. We've also been in touch with the larger development, Lewis Plan Communities, because they're the ones who did this whole development and they are taking it very seriously. So we want you to know that we want your homes to be done. And me personally, what you said earlier, I'm not interested in approving a lot more homes until they get yours fixed. So we're going to do our best to address these, to get them taken care of for you. Speak directly to John and his senior home care representative and Lewis Plan Communities to help you. So we can give you this information. I don't know, do we want to have you give you have all the signatures and do you have your numbers or emails on there? We can send this to you. Yeah, go please.
I did not gather phone numbers or emails, but I have everyone's phone number through my text, so I could post that and get it if you'd like.
Okay.
She has it on her speaker card. So.
Okay.
Yes,
We'll make sure you get this information, then you can disseminate to your neighbors. Does that work for you?
sure.
Okay.
Could I offer my experience as well as
Sure,
a mother? And
yeah.
I would just like to talk about on the bulletin where it says oppose Richmond, there is a picture on there that shows a patio door with no handle and no locking mechanism. I have 3 children, 5, 3, and a newborn of 4 months old at the time he was new. And they were urging us to close our home with no lock on our door, no handle on the door. The handle went missing due to their superintendent taking it off our home and putting it on another house that they were trying to close quickly. And we were vandalized in the time that the handle was removed and us closing. So we had local teens come in and spread mud all over our brand new house. The superintendent took over a month to clean the things that had been vandalized. We came to our final walkthrough and they were still in there painting our home. They still were cleaning mud out of the carpets. We still did not have a handle on the door. My husband actually went to Home Depot and petitioned a door handle person who ended up giving us one for free that we brought with us at another inspection time and put on the door ourselves. Something that he was able to accomplish in 30 minutes, they didn't accomplish in months. And the fact that they were willing to close our home in an unsafe manner just shows you that they have this phrase on their website. It's personal. It's not about the money. We want to give a personal experience with the dream home. And it doesn't feel personal. It feels very much like it's dollars and cents to them. That's all that we are. And for someone to be able to look my children in the face at our walkthroughs and say it's safe for them to be in a home that's not secure, especially with my husband being in corrections in which inmates can Google his address. I'd like to just say that what Mr. Bayless emailed is not even close to acceptable response.
Well, I knew you would feel that way and I don't disagree with you. It sounds like you guys have been through a lot.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to read it to you just so you understand he did contact. What I'm doing right now, I'm going to forward that to the city clerk. So she has the new guy's email and we'll make sure you guys get that. And you have our commitment that we will stay on top of this and make sure you guys get what you need.
Okay,
We're very sorry.
thank you.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you bringing this to our
Yes.
attention.
Yes.
We would not have known about it without you.
Okay,
And anybody else who wants to speak on this, I want to grant you that opportunity. So this, more than
Yeah.
anything else, is going to get their attention and we'll stay on them as well.
Yes, hi there, and thank you. My name is Hiawatha Wheat, and I just moved to Lincoln about 2 years ago from Colorado. And I've had a Richmond home before in Denver. And moving here, I was like, oh, we'll just do Richmond again. And plus, they had the floor plan that I liked. My experience with Richmond is just like everyone else. Some of our warranty issues doesn't appear to be as significant as being safety issues like some of the others are having, but we still have a long list. And the warranty website is like putting your information into just a dark hole. You do not get a response. They don't call you. They don't email you. I must have entered the same list of warranty items like 5 times. And finally, I went to the sales office and said, who is the person that's handling this? Because the original person we started with quit. So she gave me the name of a new person, and he did reach out and he came out to the house, and he didn't have my list, and I had to give him all the information all over again. And that was unacceptable. And we've been here in our home for just slightly over a year. And we are still waiting for all of those items to be taken care of. And it's just ridiculous. And then we see them building all these other new homes. We're like, so what do we, just chop liver? So I do agree. It's a money issue. Richmond just wants your money. Once they get your money, they don't care about you anymore. They're going to move on to the next person. So that's pretty much what we've been going through, and it's just been totally unacceptable. Thank you.
I know I saw a lot of other volunteers. Yeah.
Pretty much more of the same here. My name is Jeff Moreland. We live on Patriot as well. We moved in, actually our walkthrough was on Valentine's Day. We spent 5 hours walking through the home, basically doing quality control. I've had to explain to Richmond over and over, we don't work for Richmond. We're not contractors. We're not builders. Their job is to provide a home. Our job is to pay. We have items still, I have 44 items here that have not been touched. People talk about safety issues, children. Our oven, the wires were live. If you open up the cabinets above the oven, you can grab the wires coming from the junction box. That's an issue. Our dishwasher was broken and installed incorrectly. It was leaking water. I can have a video so badly, leaking right down onto the electrical outlets, and it was breaking the breakers for the whole downstairs. We didn't have appliances in our kitchen for how many months? Months. We just got them in a few weeks ago. Everything goes unheard. Their biggest answer is complain on our Instagram. These homes are $750,000. They seem to think that I've had discussions with people higher up, and they love to use the term warranty. Warranty means complete and then failed. We're probably more than likely all still in the construction phase. These aren't warranty problems. Our carpets are peeling up. Our floor plans are all basically incorrect. I'm lucky enough, I was at the home site 2 to 3 times a week, and they took me off site because I'm not allowed to be there without a builder. We had numerous problems. I was basically the superintendent for my build. The staircase was incorrect. The walls were incorrect. One of our walls wasn't anchored down. It was 6 inches out of square because it wasn't bolted. The anchor bolts weren't bolted. And again, not everything goes unheard. We're pretty much just sitting ducks at this point. I've talked about an attorney. I've asked for my money back. We have nothing but kind of asking you guys for your help yeah, it's been, I've purchased a handful of properties, and this has been horrible. Pushing back, our journey was different, not forced closed. Our closed was continued to be pushed back because of their lack of basically doing anything. So our interest rates were continuing to go up, 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 and we couldn't close on the home until construction was complete. So we were about 30 days late, which resulted in almost a full point in our interest rate. It's about $1,000 a month. And I'm out of time, but you kind of can see where I'm going with it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for sharing that. Sean, I can't help but wonder, hearing what we just heard, how do we grant a certificate of occupancy after an inspection for folks to move in?
You know, I'll have to pull a sampling of those permits and actually look into what there are base level safety things that people need to meet to get a C of O. And so the gentleman just mentioned a specific comment about wiring. That's very concerning to me. I'm gonna have to pull them and we're gonna have to do a little bit of an audit on it.
Please.
Yep.
And please send a link of this conversation to the builder and to Phil, if you would, please.
And to the residents, we'll get my contact info out to you, but I'm gonna be having a conversation with Richmond. I got an email today, but tomorrow morning. And so I'll help be your conduit until this is all sorted out.
Gwen, I can't see who's online. Is there anybody from Richmond online? I want to give them an opportunity to speak if they're.
I don't recognize any names. If they could raise their hand. I don't see any hands.
Okay. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for creating this time. And I really want to thank Amy and her husband. Honestly, I just randomly walked out yesterday to pick up my package and I saw the poster and I said, oh my goodness, this is a thing. I think we're not the only ones having these problems. So I just want to say thank you so much for putting your time and effort into this. It really means so much to us. But all that to say, just like Jeff, our neighbor, thankfully we lived in Sacramento before we moved to Lincoln. I was pretty much at the housing side about once a week, literally being the manager, the superintendent, the inspector, everything you can find, sending multiple emails, just making sure that everything is done the way we want it to be done. And just like everyone has said, not just the warranty, but we did pay for our tiling work in the kitchen to go up to the ceiling, and it's still not done. I mean, to me, it's so crazy that we can pay for something, you took our money, and it's still not done. At some point, very recently, I had to reach out to our realtor to say, you know, we're having this problem. Do you think you could perhaps help us out? And she said, wow, this is rather strange, but let me see what I can do. She finally got in touch with the superintendent. He finally called me back to say, you know, I have been sick, this, and that. At that point, I'm thinking, you know what? I've sent multiple emails, done lots of things. It is what it is. Just let's get this done. And he said he was going to get back to us, I believe this week. Crickets, nothing. It is really not okay. Like everyone has said, we paid so much money, our bloods and our sweats. I'm also a social worker. I don't make much money, but this is an American dream. I am an immigrant, my husband and I. We worked so hard to get here. And I am in favor of making sure that things are done, not putting the other residents in this kind of predicament. I mean, I've gone online on the Instagram, seeing people's comments, and I guess I've been nice enough to not say, don't buy this house, run away. Just watching from behind, right? But I'm just so thankful that we have this space to really talk to you guys, to really see how much effort that, you know, every one of you are putting into our city. And I'm really glad that, you know, we've really picked the city. So just thank you. And I just hope that things are going to change. Thank you.
So I do want to say, this has got to be incredibly disheartening for all of you. Please know that Lincoln is a wonderful community and we're incredibly pleased that you've chosen to make it your home.
Yeah.
We'll make this right. We'll find a way and we'll get it done.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. We're very honored that you chose Lincoln because it is a great community. And I'm so sorry that you have struggled for so long. I wish we'd have known sooner, but you're here now. And so we're going to take care of it for you.
I have a question for them. Well, maybe for staff too. There's more than one builder out there, correct?
Yes.
Do you hear from the other neighbors? Are the other builders, are they having trouble rather than Richmond?
Sure, I can speak to that. As a nurse at Sutter Roseville Medical Center, we have a lot of nurses that we all were buying at the same time. So 12 Bridges was a huge project. And I have not heard anything like what we're going through. Also, I am a previous owner of a Lennar home in South Sacramento, which we did have little things, but they were very quick to rectify those things. And it was nothing construction. It was little paint here, a little drywall here, clean this up, kind of thing like that. So I would say this is actually very irregular for this area and for my previous experience.
I was specifically in Independence. Anybody that's bought a new house has some little problems that you have to get fixed.
Mhm.
And usually they get fixed. It's a planned community. And I was wondering the quality of the community rather than, is it a problem in one builder or is it in all three builders or four builders? And sure. Because that's unacceptable at two levels.
My name's Melissa Miller. I'm actually a real estate agent. Sorry, my voice is, I've got a little something going on. So to answer that question properly, it's absolutely not even close to any of the other builds. DR Horton, Lennar, Tim Lewis, any of them, yes, they have issues. They've got, you know, air conditioning, paint, stuff like that. I spoke with Richmond American Homes personally, Kay. Their superintendents, their office people, their warranty people, every single one of them have told me they hire minimum wage people that don't know what they're doing to come in and build semi-custom homes at a level that they're not capable of building. They make mistakes and then they just kind of try to brush it off. And it's more than what everybody's saying here. It's the entire community has an issue. The other builders, yeah, you're going to have one here and there, but I've done sales for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this. And we live in the community.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah. I figured, sorry.
Hopefully every builder doesn't say, that's what you get today.
Yeah, and they don't tell you we hire at minimum wage to come in and build your house and that's what you get. That's not what you tell somebody that's buying a semi-custom home. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else on that topic or any other not on our agenda tonight? Anyone online, Gwen?
Yes, Mayor. Karen Oakes, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mayor Joyner, Mayor Pro Tem Carlskin, City Council members, staff, guests. By now, the City Council members and Public Safety Chief Matt Alves have received my letter of May 26th outlining concerns with stop signing running in the Sun City Lincoln Hills community. My thanks to Chief Alves for communicating the issue to Officer Schneider. I'm appreciative of Officer Schneider's time to discuss the situation. My letter outlines the epidemic of stop sign running on Sun City streets with an example of a high-speed through the community racer that has now happened more than once. While there has been an expressed awareness of the problem and everyone is grateful for Officer Schneider's enforcement efforts, I believe a systemic solution involving multiple partners is needed. I am not naive to think the problem is specific to Sun City, and I realize that legislating good behavior is no more possible than enforcing respect. Sun City represents a unique population. Many pedestrians have mobility limitations and many drivers lack the acute perceptive and reflexive abilities of other drivers. In my letter, I propose traffic calming elements to be considered, speed bumps before crosswalks, flashing in-ground lights, and additional enforcement would seem to be mitigations that could be considered and that would be familiar to that demographic. To better understand the need, consider that in an observational study of the intersection of Stone Ridge Boulevard and Spring Valley conducted on June 6th, there were 120 vehicles traveling through the intersection in 20 minutes and 58 violations, or in other words, 48% of the drivers did not stop. Some studies suggest 20% is average for always stop control intersections. There is a problem for drivers, pedestrians, and others using the streets. I have not heard back from council members about these concepts, so I would instead request tonight that the city council ask for a traffic study to be initiated by the city engineering department. Assessing traffic flows and violations without enforcement would provide additional data that could complement observational studies to understand driver behavior. If traffic calming strategies are considered too expensive or there are perceived negative consequences, consider the option of removing all the stop signs in Sun City. There would be improved traffic flow within the community, improved access through the community, reduced noise, improved air quality, fewer enforcement calls, and faster response times for emergency responders. Alternatively, removing at least one stop sign at existing four-way stops is supported by a researcher at George Washington University in Virginia. This would boost not only driver safety, but environmental sustainability as well. His work is based on the assumption that four-way stops create a false sense of security and then says, why should I stop when everybody else will? Please request additional study of the problem to improve safety in Sun City, Lincoln Hills. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Trying to figure out who to toss this to. This is an ongoing challenge, obviously. We hear about it most often up at Lincoln Hills, but I think it does go on throughout our community. So is there a value in jumping in and doing a full traffic study of Lincoln Hills? Again, can we request the assistance of the HOA, since it's their folks who are.
Wasn't one done on Spring Valley? Wasn't it the last one we did?
They reduced the speed limit. We're to 35. Running stop signs is a big problem. I've almost hit people. Travis. Yeah, we certainly.
Yeah, I can talk to Roland, look at what areas were in the most recent traffic study, and we could do a targeted approach on this one. I'm a little unclear if we're looking at stop sign warrants or if we're looking at speed surveys and traffic counts. They are going to be two different studies with two different outcomes.
I think what I'm hearing overall, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, is people running stop signs. Still there?
Yes, I am still here. I'm just playing with the mute and the unmute buttons that keep popping up on the screen. The stop sign running is clearly a situation. I understand from the director of the HOA that there needs to be limitations on the speed limits through the community to support golf cart traffic as well. So he has participated in a dialogue about this. The stop sign running is a situation that I have observed personally by sitting on several street corners just to try to understand the behavior. And there are distinct situations where folks just do not perceive any real reason to stop.
And Karen, as long as I've been on the council, which is coming up on 15 years, we've been hearing the same thing. We've tried to address it. And we've had the conversation about, do we pull out all the stop signs? That was not perceived as a advantageous way to go. So Sean, any thoughts?
Yeah, maybe what's best. We actually just had a similar situation. I don't know if it was related to, I think it was adding stop signs, right, Travis, on Spring Valley, and is that right?
That's a sight distance issue. I mean, again, it's just MUTCD warrants on the stop signs.
So maybe what we could do is we can connect with Karen. Roland is really good at this type of work and get an idea about whether there's some calming measures that might help the situation. And if not, then we probably really need to rethink. Perception of safety issues as it relates to traffic is very different than what data typically indicates. And so we now have some tools at our disposal. The chief has a trailer that can basically record speeds in that area. We can do some in-person surveys and kind of come up with some ideas about something that might assist in that area.
Sound like a good first step, Karen?
Yes, if I'm still connected with you, very much so. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on an item that is not on our agenda tonight?
Very quickly.
Maybe while we were just talking, I have 3 more people that would like to be added to my signature sheet. So can I have it?
Thanks so much. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close our public comment period. And we'll move on to our consent agenda. I don't believe there's any member of the council that wishes to pull an item. Am I correct? No. Is there any member of the public that wishes to have an item pulled from the agenda for further discussion? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion on the entirety of the consent agenda.
Okay, I move approval of the consent agenda.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Gwen, roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Andriana,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint, and Mayor Joyner.
Yes. We move on to item 9, public hearings. Item 9A, conduct a public hearing and waive the first reading and adopt by title only ordinance 1063B, amending the Lincoln Municipal Code section 13.04.155 regarding meter accessibility and further finding the ordinance is exempt from the environmental review under California Environmental Quality Act. Ms. Mollenkopf.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this item comes to you at a request of our Utilities Department. So as you can see from the staff report, the current ordinance, Lincoln Municipal Code Section 13.04.155, provides that if staff is unable to access a meter box, we have to provide 30 days worth of notice in order to request that the property owner provide access, trim the hedges, clear out the dirt, whatever it is that's necessary to provide access to that meter box. So the information I received was that from staff's experience, which is quite extensive, is that allowing the violator 30 days to make a correction is far too long of a period of time. If they need to do a shut off, if there's a major leak, if there's some type of damage to the city's water infrastructure and they have to give 30 days notice in order to get access to that line, it is problematic. And so the request is that we revise the ordinance to reduce the allotted time to 7 days and then to provide staff with the authority to actually remove the obstruction if the customer fails to do so within that period of time, and then charge back to the customer staff time at the adopted rate in our master fee schedule. So that's really the heart and soul of the ordinance. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Questions from council?
So you're just asking for the notification period to go from 30 to 7 days.
It would be,
And then and then staff can remove it. Okay.
staff can remove it and then charge
Charge
the
back.
customer the
Okay.
time that was required
Yeah.
to do the work.
Christine, I'm assuming if there is an emergency situation, we're not just going to sit back and wait 7 days. Should that be?
No, we have other ordinances that provide for emergency situations. I mean, if there's a massive leak and we're, flooding thousands of gallons an hour out on the street, then that's a different situation. But under these circumstances, staff felt this was a reasonable accommodation.
All right, very good. There's nothing more from council. I'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak on this item? It is a public hearing, isn't it? I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on this matter, please approach the podium. Anyone online? None. We'll close the public hearing, bring it back up here for action. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I move approval of ordinance 1063B, amending the code regarding meter accessibility.
Second.
Motion and a second. Gwen?
Yes, Councilmember Andriana.
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Joyner.
Yes. Item 9B, conduct a public hearing, accept public testimony, and adopt 2 resolutions for the Landscaping and Lighting District Number 1, Resolution 2023-104, approving the final engineer's report, ordering improvements and confirming the diagram and assessment for the Lighting and Landscaping District Number 1 for fiscal year 23-24, and Resolution 2023-105, ordering the levy and collection of assessments in Lighting and Landscaping District Number 1 for fiscal year 23-24. Matt?
Good evening, Mayor Joyner and council members and members of the public. The city's Landscaping and Lighting District Number 1, otherwise known as the LAD, was formed in 1982 to fund the maintenance of city landscaping, parks, open space, trails, and street lighting. The LAD is comprised of the original benefit zone and the 32 additional benefit zones, which in total encompasses approximately 40% of the city's parcels. And last week we had at the last council meeting, we had a lengthy presentation with visual maps if anyone wants to review that on YouTube. The city places assessments annually on the county property tax bills to provide funding for operations and maintenance of the improvements benefiting parcels in the LAD. The Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972 requires that an annual engineer's report be prepared and approved by city council to set assessment rates each fiscal year. For fiscal year 23-24, the assessment rates proposed for all benefit zones do not exceed the maximum rate set when the LAD was originally formed or additional territory was annexed in. The fiscal year 23-24 collection of assessments is estimated to be $3,728,000. City Council took the first steps in the fiscal year 2023-24 annual approval process on May 23rd with the adoption of 2 resolutions initiating proceedings, ordering and approving the preliminary engineer's report, and setting the public hearing date for June 13th, 2023. This evening, city staff is recommending City Council take the next steps required in the annual approval process by conducting a public hearing, accepting public testimony, and adopting 2 resolutions. 1, a resolution approving the final engineer's report, ordering improvements and confirming the diagram and assessments for fiscal year 2023-24, and 2, a resolution ordering the levy and collection of assessments within the LAD for fiscal year 2023-24. Following the public hearing and adoption of the 2 resolutions this evening, the LAD assessments will be submitted to the county prior to their June 30th deadline. Also, city staff at a future date to be determined plan to conduct an analysis and develop a strategy to address the funding issues for the LAD that were presented to City Council at the City Council meeting on May 23rd. That is also available to the public for viewing on YouTube if they want to go back and watch that. City staff will come back to City Council at a future date with findings of the analysis and recommendations for consideration. That concludes my presentation. Myself and Ed Espinosa with Francisco and Associates is available online if there are any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the council?
No.
All right, seems pretty straightforward to me. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone from the public wishing to testify on this item? Being none, close the public hearing, bring it back up here for action. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, my question is, do we have to do them one at a time?
I
or
think we can do them together.
Together? Okay, I move that we adopt resolution 2023-104 and resolution 2023-105.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilmember Andriotta?
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskint?
Yes.
And Mayor Joyner?
Yes. Move on to item 9C, conduct a public hearing, accept public testimony, and adopt 2 resolutions for the benefit assessment district number 1 annual update, resolution 2023-106, approving the final engineer's report, ordering improvements, and confirming the diagram and assessments for benefit assessment district number 1 for fiscal year 2023-24, and resolution 2023-107, ordering the levy and collection of assessments with benefit assessment district number 1 for fiscal year 23-24. Matt.
Good evening again. The city's benefit assessment district number 1 was formed in 2005 to fund operations and maintenance of the city flood and storm drain improvements, benefiting properties within Lincoln Crossing, Aiken Ranch, Cressley Grove, and Lincoln Highland developments. The city places assessments for the district annually on the county property tax bills. An annual engineer's report is prepared and approved by City Council to set assessment rates each fiscal year. For fiscal year 2023-24, the assessment rates proposed for the district are at the maximum rate set when the district was originally formed or additional territory was annexed in. The fiscal year 2023-24 collection of assessments is estimated to be $88,600. City Council took the first steps in the fiscal year 2023-24 annual approval process on May 23rd with the adoption of 2 resolutions, initiating proceedings, ordering and approving the preliminary engineer's report, and setting the public hearing date for June 13th, 2023. This evening, city staff is recommending City Council take the next steps in the annual approval process by conducting a public hearing, accepting public testimony, and adopting two resolutions. One, a resolution approving the final engineer's report, ordering improvements and confirming the diagram and assessments for fiscal year 2023-24. And two, a resolution ordering the levy and collection of assessments within the district for fiscal year 2023-24. Following the public hearing and adoption of the two resolutions this evening, the district assessments will be submitted to the county prior to their June 30th deadline. That concludes my presentation on this item. And again, Francisco and Associates is available for questions as well as so am I.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Any questions from council? No. Being none, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on this matter, if you could come to the podium, please. Anyone online, Gwen? All right, we'll close the public hearing. I'll accept the motion.
Okay, I move that we adopt resolution 2023-106 and resolution 2023-107.
Second.
Yes. Councilmember Andriana?
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskin?
Yeah.
Councilmember Lauritsen?
Yes.
And Mayor Joyner?
Yes. Last public hearing, conduct a public hearing and determine that the project is exempt and no further environmental analysis is required pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, sections 1531.5, class 15 minor land division, and section 15-183, projects consistent with a community plan or zoning, and adopt resolution 2023-108 approving the James Girton tentative map, parcel map, subject to specific conditions of approval incorporated as Exhibit A.
Good evening, Mel Pavlinas, joining Mayor General and the rest of the City Council. This is a brief PowerPoint presentation for you, summarizing what the Plan Commission has considered back on the 17th of May, recommending approval of this project, the James Girton tentative parcel map. On May 17th, the Plan Commission heard this item, recommending unanimously approval with a 7-0 vote, approving the project to your council based on a project analysis and findings of detailed in the staff report as presented to your council already, based on also on the conditions of approval applied to the project. And this is documented further in resolution number 2023-10 as an attachment to your staff report. The map, as a quick recap of what the Plan Commission considered, it's a parcel map about 3.34 acres in size into two parcels filed by the applicant Larry Farina and the property owner James Girton. Just a brief overall location map of the property. Property is vacant currently. That's right there where it says project site. It is within Toll Bridges plan area, located at the southeast corner of Colonnade Drive and Red Rock Road over here. Red area means it's commercially zoned, which is a standard zoning in this area of Toll Bridges. And it's surrounded by existing, similar existing and feature zones, commercial zones to the east, to the north, and to the south. Toll Bridges Drive is right here, just for context and orientation, and that connects, Colonnade Drive connects from the south side of that Toll Bridges Drive intersection. This is the map that was considered by the Plan Commission. The entire property shown here in its entirety is a 3.34 acre parcel. Parcel 1 is in red, which is 0.80 acres. Parcel 2 is in blue, which is 2.54 acres. Combined would be the two parcel of the overall size of the property. As discussed in the staff report, and as a background, there is an approved hotel there. Again, that approval was from 2019, so several years ago. And as a result of that development, you have existing improvements on site, infrastructures, access. The pads are already built, I believe, and all the infrastructure is already there. And that hotel is right here. There is a conceptual pad area right here in parcel 1, but that has not been approved. It's just more for conceptual siting of the property so that it meets, so that it can satisfy, potentially meet the setbacks and the general location on that particular parcel, but no development has been approved on parcel 1. So this is just more for conceptual purposes only. As discussed in the staff report and considered by the Plan Commission, the project, the map before you was deemed consistent with the general plan, the Toll Bridges specific plan, Title 17 and 18 of the Lincoln Municipal Codes. It's also deemed exempt from further environmental analysis per SEQA exemption, per SEQA section 15315 and 15183. And conditions of approval have been applied to ensure orderly and timely implementation of the map. As such, as recommended by the Plan Commission to your council, that the City Council find the project exempt from further environmental analysis per SEQA section 15315 and 15183, and adopt resolution 2023-108, approving the project based on the findings and conditions of approval provided to your council. The applicant is here and he has his own separate PowerPoint slide. We have not received any comments, public comments on this project, either at the Plan Commission and here. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Right. Any questions from council at this point?
No.
None? The applicant wants to do a PowerPoint of their own. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
And do they want to do that as part of public testimony or in advance of that?
No.
Before you start, I do have one question. By doing the lot split, the FAR changed on the hotel. Was it a material change at all, as far as the Florida area ratio? The square footage to the acreage.
That was something that came up during the review of the project. Given that this is a map, it's just creating 2 lots, but it has no effects, physical effects on the approval, which, by the way, it already has received its building permits and all the improvement plans. It's a matter of them pulling the actual construction of the site, but it has no material effect to the actual use operation of the hotel.
So it was not material. Thank you.
All right. And Christine, just so that I know, can I do this presentation outside of the public hearing, or does it need to be a portion of it?
It's really at the discretion of council.
Okay. What would you like to do? Go ahead.
Mayor Joyner and council members, thank you for taking the time to hear me tonight. My name is Larry Farina. I'm the applicant and I'm representing Jim and Jeanette Girton, who are with us here tonight. They are the owners of the Lincoln La Quinta Hotel project. On behalf of Jim and Jeanette, we want to thank the city staff for all their efforts and working with us to get this proposal to you for your consideration. And your city planner has presented all the pertinent details. But I wanted to take a few minutes tonight to explain where we are with the project, because I know there's a lot of questions, and why we are where we are with the project. So this is a picture you've seen before. This is the future Lincoln La Quinta Hotel. The Girtons, as you know, are not developers. They live and operate businesses here in the Lincoln community, and this hotel is not a development to them, but it's truly a dream that the Girtons have to provide quality, reasonably priced travel lodging in the city of Lincoln. I was brought into this project in December of 2018, been a long time, when the Girtons made an offer to purchase the property to construct the hotel. We hired an architect, we hired an engineer to design the project, and we went through the process of acquiring our entitlements. After a 5.5-hour hearing at the Planning Commission, where we had much opposition to the project, your commission approved the project in August of 2019. The opposition then appealed that decision, and it came to the city council for another 4.5-hour meeting, where 2 of your members had to leave, unfortunately, due to some unfounded accusations at the time, and they recused themselves. And at this point, I want to say on behalf of the Girtons, thank you for what you did. I know that was not easy. And what you did, though, was to preserve the integrity of the hearing, which we appreciated. And the denial of that appeal was given in October of 2019 by the remaining council, one of which is still here tonight. That denial being granted with no shadow was, I think, a major thing that happened. So thank you very much. We thought we were on our way to building a hotel at that point, and a lawsuit was filed. So that was filed to overturn your decision. And after the owners have spent a six-figure sum to defend the project and took 11 months, the project was finally denied as having no merit by a Superior Court judge. So through all this, the Gertons have still never wavered in giving up on the dream. During the lawsuit, we were preparing improvement plans so we could continue to construct the project. This is the approved site plan, and we started to work on this in 2020 after receiving the site improvement plans approved by the city. We've completed this entire section of Red Rock Road, about 750 feet of street, all the infrastructure that goes with it, and it has been dedicated to the city. Along with that, we have completed all the infrastructure inside the project, including infrastructure that supplies services to the hotel as well as to this future site. We have all of the interior curb gutter sidewalks are installed. This lane into Terracotta is installed. All the entrances are installed. So we have a project that is, from the groundwork, 98% complete at this point. So with that, we were proceeding with the building plans. Unfortunately, we had about 70% of the building plans completed. We had reviews already done by the city, and our architect passed away. So that was in September of 2020, and we had to find a new architect, hire a new architect, start all over from scratch. So 2020 was not only not good for us from that perspective, but 2020 was the great COVID pandemic. And we had no idea, I don't think anybody had any idea how that was going to affect us and this project. The biggest impact on the project was financing. Once the COVID thing hit, people didn't want to loan money to hotels anymore. They didn't know hotels were ever going to have a patron in them again. We had private financing secured for a good portion of the project, and all those private financiers bailed real fast. The commercial lenders basically played with us ever since. We have had several applications for loans. To give you how extreme it gets, we had one application that after 4 months of submitting documents, they came back and said, you know, we decided not to do business in California. Thank you very much. And we started over again. So that's, in spite of all of this, we are in process of getting the project financed in spite of bank collapses and everything else going on. We actually hope to be starting construction on this hotel within the next 60 days. That's our goal at this point. So we are getting close. We see the goal line. That brings us to today. So we are here to look at a simple lot split. I wanted to comment, this is the landscape plan that was approved, just so you know, everything that was approved on these improvement plans is still being constructed regardless of what happens to this lot split. It is all being done. So this is going to be a beautiful project. We're just going to have a little bare lot, and you can see right there, it says future building. That's what we're talking about for tonight. It's always been a plan to have a food service facility associated with the hotel. As we were trying to go through the financing, what we realized is that if we encumber this entire piece of property with financing for a hotel, we're going to have a really hard time finding financing to build a food service facility. So we started this lot split process, and I think we started it about 4 months ago. Tonight, all we're asking is, I think we can see it here, we're going to draw a line right down here and across here and separate that little piece of property. As I said, everything that has been approved will be constructed as it has been approved. Everything that is completed will be completed. And the parcel split will make no changes whatsoever to the project. It's really a simple thing, drawing a line on paper. That's all we're asking for, okay? And that's what I just wanted to stress. We're not asking for anything to be done any differently. When the time comes that we decide what we're going to do with that little piece of property, we will be back before the Planning Commission looking for for entitlements and permits to do that as well. So we are looking forward to this dream becoming a reality very soon, and we're hoping by the fall of 2024, we're going to invite you all to a grand opening for the new Lincoln La Quinta Hotel. That's our goal. Tonight, we just ask you to approve this little simple lot split, and that's it. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Larry. Questions from the council?
I don't have a question, but I do want to say, Mr. Farina and Jim and Jeanette, it's really great to see you. And I just want to thank you for your determination and your tenacity and not giving up on this project. And when it is done and you do have that grand opening, we're going to have a big fat party.
So I do have two questions that are more my curiosity than anything else, have nothing to do with the decision tonight. Is the intention to hold on to that restaurant pad and develop it yourselves, or are you thinking of putting that up for sale too?
At this point, the intention is to keep it. There is not an intention to sell it.
Okay. And have they dropped the Del Sol portion of the name altogether?
You know, it's a La Quinta del Sol, which is the sunburst and all of that, but it's not in the name. It's just La Quinta. The Del Sol is just the emblem. I don't understand all that, but that's La Quinta's thing.
Because I've seen them all across Texas and they say
Del Sol
La
on it.
Quinta del Sol or just Del Sol by Wyndham.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is the approved signage that we will use from La Quinta. You know, that's all I can tell you.
Like I said, just curiosity.
Yeah,
Because the original pictures that we had said Del Sol on it.
yeah. And since then, for whatever reason, it's been dropped. That could change. I mean, you know, as we go through this process, everything we do has to be reviewed and re-reviewed by the La Quinta franchise. And we've gone through several minor revisions because of that. So until the signs go up, I can't promise you exactly what it's going to say.
I know you don't want to come up, but the folks at home won't be able to hear you unless you do.
Just for clarification, the Del Sol is basically the structure of the building, the amount of rooms in comparison to like the swimming pool, your food service where they can come in and eat. It's similar nationwide. So that way, when they say Del Sol, it's meaning that they do have a pool, they do have a food service and a grand area on the inside to where there's seating and then also meeting rooms.
It's a uniform brand.
It's a
that they should be
uniform
able to
brand, and
understand.
yes, for architectural structure. Thank you.
All right, with that, if there's nothing more from council, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on this matter, if you could please approach the podium. Seeing none in chambers, anyone online, Glenn? All right, close the public hearing and accept a motion.
I move that we approve resolution 2023-108.
Second.
Yes, Councilmember Andriana.
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskent. And Mayor Joyner.
Yes. All right, that completes our public hearings. We move on to general business. Item 10A, receive a presentation on the City of Lincoln water, wastewater, and solid waste rate study. And 2, provide direction to staff regarding initiating the Prop 218 process for water, wastewater, and solid waste rates.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and lead in this item. This is going to be a difficult discussion. Over the past number of months, we've been working to address what Anita and I have identified as probably the most significant and serious financial situation that the city faces among many. And that is related to 3 structural deficits that you have in your water, wastewater, and solid waste funds. The deficits are so significant that without correction, those funds will be effectively bankrupt anywhere from about, depending on the fund, we're talking about anywhere from roughly 18 months to 24 months from today. So serious and needs to be addressed immediately. So what we did just as soon as we had kind of finished that analysis was we began the process, which some of them had already begun outside of the financial review, We initiated rate studies on all three funds and accelerated all three so that we could have them viewed in their totality at the same time. Although you may recall earlier, late last year, the direction from council was to try to spread those out. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in a financial position that just doesn't allow that. We've received some of the preliminary information, which you'll see tonight, and it has been generally finalized. Last week, Nita, Angela, Matt, myself, and Jen Brown took our show on the road and held 4 different community meetings, generally giving information on the health of or lack thereof of the funds, the consequences of inaction, and potential rate structures moving forward, which is what you'll hear tonight. One of the things that we spent quite some time answering when we were at these community meetings was questions about 5 years ago, questions about 8 years ago, acknowledgements that there were some real challenges that the cities dealt with as they were trying to adopt rates during those times. While we're happy to have those discussions as long as it's necessary, what I said to the community members, and I'm saying to you tonight, is that none of those discussions will solve the problem today. This needs to be a forward-thinking analysis on how we address, the very serious position that we're in currently. So with that, I'm going to that rosy picture, I'm going to pass it over to Nita, who is going to pass it over to our consultants.
Good evening, Nita Racker, Finance Director. Sean took all of the points I was going to say, as usual.
He always does.
He always does. Just to add to that, I would say that the city has contracted with Raftellus from September of last year. And so we have been moving hard and fast on these rate studies. To kind of put it in perspective, some previous rate studies that have been undertaken by the city took a couple years or longer to accomplish in order to bring to fruition. And we've accomplished it in a much accelerated time schedule. You'll be meeting our consultants in just a moment, and I'm sure if they could speak freely, they would tell you that I have driven them very hard in order to get this product before you. However, that doesn't mean that we've cut any corners. That doesn't mean that we've have shoddy workmanship. The rate studies that we have and the models that they have produced are above board. They are well thought out, they are logically designed, and they are very sound. And in order to ensure that all of those items are true, not just my assessment of them, the city also had conducted a third-party independent review by Community Resource Group, led by our former finance director of the city of Lincoln, Bill Zanoni, in order to ensure that he also shared the same opinion and assessment of those rate models. I think the only other thing that I would say is that there's been a lot of work and collaboration. Rate models aren't something that you can just give all the data to the consultant and let them crawl into a cave and come back out months later with a product. That we have had bi-weekly meetings with the consultant, that we are very familiar with the information in these rate studies, that we stand behind the rate models and the information, and that we are not excited to be bringing the information before you, but we are satisfied with the product and that it is well thought out and well designed. With that, I'm going to bring up our consultants and introduce them. Teresa Jurcic, she's our project manager with Raftellus, and Sarah Neely, she's the lead analyst with Raftellus. Teresa managed our water and wastewater study, and Sarah has managed our solid waste study. Teresa.
Thank you, Nita. Mayor, City Council members, thank you for having us here tonight. Excuse me, clear my throat. We appreciate the opportunity to walk you through what we've done for the 3 enterprises with developing the financial plans and the rate studies. So we'll just give a brief overview of kind of the rate setting steps and where we are in that process, kind of a quick refresher on the Prop 218 process. And then for each of the enterprises, we'll walk you through the financial plan assumptions and results, some scenarios for your consideration, and then the resulting rates from that analysis. So rate study includes several steps. first, the financial plan that we develop that is used to look at your annual operating expenses, capital expenditures, reserve targets, et cetera, and what sort of revenues that you need to make sure that you can deliver on the levels of service that you want to provide to your community. From there, we take that information and allocate those costs out to the different customer classes and functions of the system based on user characteristics, numbers of accounts, meters, et cetera, like that. And from that information, we're able to drive the rates. And that's what we've come here tonight to show you. The next step of that process is the rate adoption and Prop 218 process, where we document all of our work in a report. The Prop 218 notice goes out, the 45-day noticing period for community involvement and review, and then the public hearing. So two big kind of chunks to the presentation tonight. The first is the financial plans. What we're doing there is trying to figure out for each of your enterprises, how big is the pie? Like how much pie do we need to make sure that everybody's getting served? And then the second portion is the cost of service rate design, which says, how big do those different slices need to be? How do we slice up that pie? So the Prop 218 process has some substantive requirements that we've summarized here. Revenues cannot exceed the funds required to provide the service. They can't be used for any purpose other than to pay for the service for which they're charged. What that means is your water enterprise can't help fund a renewal or an upgrade to a library or something like that. So the revenues that come in for water stay for water, same for wastewater, et cetera. The amount of the fee cannot exceed the proportional cost of providing the service. So then our task is to set rates that are proportional to the cost of providing the service. They're reasonably allocated across your customer groups, and that we're using reliable data to develop these rates. There are also procedural requirements. So the city develops or identifies the parcels that are subject to the change. We calculate the amount of the charge to be imposed. We provide written notice to all the owners in the Prop 218 notice, documenting the rates and the amounts and the reason for the change. And then no less than 45 days after mailing the notices, then you have the public hearing, and you count all the consents. And if there's that majority consent, then you can't adopt the rates per Prop 218. So now I'll move into a discussion of the water enterprise. So what we do in our modeling is build an Excel model, and we like to look out 10 years, even though it's a 5-year rate setting period. We want to make sure that nothing's going to happen in those latter years that we need to kind of set you up for success for now. So the model is used to evaluate those overall revenue adjustments to make sure you can sufficiently fund your annual operating costs, capital, et cetera, as well as meeting your reserve targets so you're in a good position later on when you may have a major capital project like a well replacement or something like that. So all the revenues that come into the water system here, they go to paying for the operations and improvement of the water system. The largest chunk of the revenues goes towards paying the purchased water costs. You get water mostly from PCWA. You also have costs that go to capital projects, employee salaries and benefits, all the other O&Ms costs and administrative costs. These costs are borne because you're here to serve your customers, your citizens, by providing them clean, safe drinking water. So the city has levels of service goals and key performance indicators that they build their own O&M programs and capital programs around to make sure that they're delivering the level of service that your customers expect. So this capital improvement program reflects trying to meet those level of service targets and growing to meet those. So in the first portion of this, in the first 5 years, you'll see it's aimed for targeting 1 mile of pipeline replacement a year. That's pipes that are at or beyond their service life, aiming to meet those, and then growing that to 2 miles per year in the second half of the plan. So it's a plan to increase that level of service, to reduce emergency repairs, which are also costly and even more inconvenient for customers. So how the CIP helps meet the level of service, like I said, the increased pipe replacement and reduces service disruptions. There's an ultimate goal to grow to 3 miles per year of pipeline replacement. The CIP also includes the water master plan update, which is going to give a revised and updated picture on your capital needs and the timing of those needs. So like, when would your next well replacement be? When do you need storage tanks to be R&R'd, that sort of thing. And that will help drive further the reserve targets and the levels that you want to build up in reserves to make sure you can fund those projects for the future. So on the other side of the equation, that was more the cost side. This is the revenue side. The big assumption is the water demand. So you can see here, the first 2 years in the light blue are the historical actual demands, and then the projections used within the model. This represents 2% growth in your residential customer account and keeping your commercial counts flat. This may be a little bit more conservative than growth numbers you might have seen in, say, your water master plan or other documents. From a rate setting perspective, we want to be a little bit more conservative on our growth estimates because we don't want to forecast demand that doesn't come in, because that means we've overestimated revenues coming in. So we try to balance those out. Additional revenue assumptions, we've presumed a moderate 1% interest rate on interest earnings on in cash reserves. Your construction water revenues, we've held constant at the fiscal year 23 budget because we know those can vary from year to year and be very highly variable. So we just hold those constant. Miscellaneous revenues also equal to the 23 budget, and then a very minor increase on those of 0.5%. And then the financial policies that we were targeting for the water are 25% of the water revenues for a minimum operating reserve target, and then a capital reserve minimum target of 1 million for fiscal year 2024, growing at 1 million per year thereafter. And I know that might sound scary that it's growing and growing and growing, but the intent is that when you have that larger well replacement or a tank project, you would draw down from your reserves and then you'd start building them back up again. So I'd like to show you some of the financial plan scenarios that we've come up with. This first one is kind of the do nothing case or the status quo case. And to orient you to these graphs, you're going to see a couple of them here. The blue bars show the projected operating fund ending balance in each year. The yellow is the projected capital fund ending balance. The blue dash is the operating target, and the black dash line is the combined operating and capital reserve fund targets. So you can see here with a do nothing case, with the projections we have for your expenses over the 10-year period and the revenues, that there's not going to be enough money in the operating fund in fiscal year 2024, at the end of fiscal year 2024. And that deficit is too large to be handled by, say, deferring preventative maintenance or some capital. So, you know, it needs to be addressed. So we've come up with 2 scenarios for you. The first one is, I kind of call riding the ship. So this is kind of that, you know, almost immediate course correction that says, let's get this ship turned around and on the right track. So it's looking at an 84% revenue adjustment. So that's the amount of revenue coming in. What happens on the rates will be a little bit different because of cost of service and everything, but an overall 84% increase to the revenue in fiscal year 2024, and then followed by a series of 3% per year adjustments thereafter. And you can see from this chart that you'll still be a little bit below target in fiscal year 24, but at or above targets by 2025. And then over the 10-year period, you kind of see the arc, and we end up kind of where we want to be, right at target. The second option for your consideration is more of a phased in approach to meeting those targets. So aiming to meet the minimum targets by the end of the 5-year rate study period. That would be fiscal year 2028. So you see that's an initial 50% adjustment followed by 3 10% per year adjustments, and then 5% per year. There's a little less wiggle room, obviously, in this scenario, which is why scenario 2 was recommended over this one for your consideration. You'll notice the blue bar in fiscal year 2024 is really small. So that's, you kind of, there's just less wiggle room if something bad were to happen. So kind of leaving that out there for folks to kind of where does your risk tolerance lie? There's definitely some trade-offs. So now I'll move into the water cost of service. So the cost of service is a method we use to take those revenue requirements and allocate them ultimately to the customers and develop the rates. It's a fundamental benchmark that's used throughout the United States, and we follow the American Water Works Association Manual M1 Principles of Water Rates, Fees, and Charges to develop this. So we take our revenue requirements and we allocate these to the functions that the water system serves. So they supply water. So they buy water from PCWA, they deliver your base needs, your peaking capacity needs, address me, et cetera. So we parcel the costs out that way, and then it flows down to the different charges. So the city's current fixed charge, there's two components to it. There's sort of like the monthly meter or the monthly fixed charge, and then there's a monthly CIP component charge. And here you have graphics here that show the difference between like a small sort of 3/4 inch, 1 inch meter and your much larger, 6 to 8 inch size meter. And currently your fixed charges together account for about 40% of your rate-based revenue. Historically, like 5-10 years ago, that was up around 55%. So what's typically recovered in that fixed cost? We have our customer service and billing type costs. We have meter replacement, meter reading, et cetera. And we can also include system capacity. So your purchased water from PCWA includes a fixed charge component as well as a variable component. So a portion of that fixed charge is captured within your guys' fixed charge because you're going to be paying that no matter what. So we want to capture that in your fixed charges as well. So this is a development of the sort of the monthly meter component or fixed charge component. You can see it's made up of the billing component and then meter costs. So the billing, we took all the costs that were allocated to billing and customer service and divided those through by the accounts. And you can see those are the same for every meter because it doesn't matter what meter size you have, a bill is a bill is a bill. The meter component captures all those other costs that I mentioned on the previous slide. And those do vary by size. Larger meters take more maintenance, they cost more, they require more capacity needs on the system, et cetera. So that is that changes by meter size, and that's based on AWWA safe operating meter capacity ratios. So that's how we ratio between the meters to get the allocation of the meter across the different meter sizes. And we add those together, and that gets our total charge for the fixed monthly charge, not yet the CIP component. And you can see that proposed charge is in bold, so about $27 a month for the 3/4 inch meter, currently about $16.80. The other fixed component is the CIP component. Since the billing charge is already taken care of, there's no billing component to this one. It's strictly on a meter size basis. And this is recovering your capital related costs in this charge. And so when we do the math on that, it comes to about $14.25. It's currently less than $1. As was mentioned before, that's one of the decreases that have happened to the water rates. It was the capital charge or the CIP component has been decreased in the last several years. So for comparison, just an order of magnitude, we are also showing Rockland's renewal and replacement charge that they are proposing for fiscal year 2024, just to kind of give you an order of magnitude balance for reference for that 1425. And together, these two components are should recover about 50% fixed revenue. So increasing from where you are with 40%, but not all the way back to where you had been historically at about 55%. Your current commodity rate is a uniform rate for all customers. We're keeping that same structure. So the remaining costs that aren't captured under fixed get allocated to the commodity charge. We divide that through by the use, and that gives us the proposed charge of $3.64 per 1,000 gallons. The K gallon is the shorthand for 1,000 gallons. And then the construction water would remain unchanged at $4.74 a 1,000 gallons. So this is the projected rate schedule under scenario 2. This is the kind of the right the ship with that initial 84% revenue adjustment followed by a series of 3% adjustments. So the first column, you have your current rates shown there. Then the next column for fiscal year 2024 with rates effective in October 1st, 2023 shows those proposed rates, and those address both the cost of service analysis as well as the revenue adjustments. So we're getting those both addressed in that same year. And then the subsequent years are the prior year increased by the revenue adjustment. So fiscal year 2025 would be for the 3/4 inch meter would be $26.99 increased by 3% and so on. This slide is showing the proposed rates under scenario 2 for the CIP component, as well as the usage or volumetric components. And it shows the same thing, and it works through the same math as the previous slide. So we've pulled together a couple bill impact slides for you. This is single family residential at 4 different usage levels from 8,000 gallons a month up to 22,000 gallons a month. And this is presuming a 3/4 inch meter, which is your most common meter size for your single family customers. So you can see the 10.7 is kind of the average customer bill, single family customer bill. And so that would be going up about 87% in that first year. And we also did this same thing for commercial customers. So again, a range of monthly usage for commercial from 12,000 gallons a month up to 107,000 gallons a month, presuming again a 3/4 inch meter, because that's also the most common meter size for your commercial customers. And you can see their average bill is about 45,000 gallons a month, and that increase is about 65%. And where you would rank compared to nearby similar districts under scenario 2, the city of Lincoln with those revenue adjustments would kind of fall in the middle of the pack. We've done similar summary for the phase-in Schedule 3. So again, the current charges, the proposed charges for fiscal year 2024, and then the subsequent years are the prior years adjusted by the revenue adjustment. So fiscal year 2025 would be the fiscal year 2024 rate increased by 10% and so on. And then a summary slide for the proposed CIP component and potable water components under the scenario 3 option. Customer bills here, same chart. The average usage of about 11,000 gallons a month, they'd see about a 51% increase in that bill. And for the commercial customers at the 45,000 gallons a month, there would be about a 35% increase in their bill. Again, comparison with your neighbors, similar agencies. Again, in the middle, you swap positions with Carmichael Water District, but you're kind of squarely in the middle of your neighboring communities under scenario 3. And just to kind of put all 3 up there together, your current charge for a single family average bill that's using about 11,000 gallons a month on a 3/4 inch meter. Their current bill at that usage level would be about $43. If you went with scenario 2, that would increase to about $80. And if you went with scenario 3, that would increase to about $65. I'd like to move on to the wastewater enterprise. So similarly here, revenues come in for the wastewater. They go to support the expenses and needs of the wastewater system to make sure you're meeting your levels of service. I want to note here that because of the transition from the city of Lincoln providing both treatment and collection, as of December, city of Lincoln now is collection only. Our analysis looked at just the collection side of it. So these percentages here reflect the percentages for the city continuing with providing the collection and customer service and billing needs for the wastewater side. The treatment is still there. It's just coming through on LISWA. So that would be a direct pass-through. There would be a charge on folks' bills that show the LISWA charge. But we're looking at what's going on with just the collection. So any of the revenues coming in, about 40% of that will go towards capital for the collection system. 27% is for operations and maintenance, and another 22% for employee salaries. The wastewater enterprise also has those level of service goals, sort of similar sets of goals, including increasing the sewer main replacement program to prevent or reduce the amount of emergency repairs and sewage backups, et cetera. So the city staff helped develop a capital improvement program to meet those level of service goals. So again, in the first 5-year period where we're setting rates, looking to meet 1 mile of sewer main replacement per year. And then in the back half of the financial plan, increasing that to 2 miles of pipeline or sewer main replacement a year. The CIP also includes an update to the wastewater master plan, which similarly to the water master plan, will look at the future capital needs and timing and cost of any major replacements, so that when you look at your capital reserves, how big do they need to be and at what and in what time frame, and then again drawing down those reserves to help pay for those capital projects. And similar financial policies and targets as the water fund. 25% of wastewater operating revenues is a target for the operating reserve, and then the capital reserve again at 1 million in fiscal year 2024, growing at 1 million per year thereafter. So our wastewater financial scenarios. Before I kind of get into those slides that you saw for the water, I just want to take like a historical snapshot of the water fund from fiscal year 2022 as a representative year. As you can see here, revenues were about half of what they needed to be, and these expenses cover both treatment and collection. So that means that the city had to draw, or the wastewater fund had to draw on its reserves to help cover that differential. And these expenses also reflect deferring some capital maintenance. So that gap could have been even greater if those capital hadn't been deferred. So kind of keeping that in mind, that like, we're kind of looking at double on the overall bill, including collection plus LISWA's treatment. It's just the revenues just aren't there to cover both of them. So we'll see that here, that if you look at the revenue versus expense breakdown between the treatment and the collection, the revenue that you're bringing in now is on the order of magnitude of what you need to continue operating the collection system and the customer service, et cetera, to the levels that you want to. But on top of that, there's still going to be that treatment charge from LISWA. So this is the no revenue adjustment scenario for the wastewater collection system. And you can see here, if we look just at that first 5 years, doesn't look too shabby. But beyond those 5 years, you really start seeing that you've been drawing down, you'll be drawing down in your reserves, they'll be going negative. So you could either start working to address that now, or you could delay that. And so we've looked at those two options for you. So the first one is a 4% adjustment starting in October, followed by a series of 5% per year adjustments. And while that you're kind of above your target early on, by the end of that 10-year period, we're kind of right at the projected targets under this scenario. And then again, LISWA's charges would be in addition to these revenue adjustments. This scenario looks at what if we defer for 5 years and take this up again at that time. You're looking at the order of magnitude of about 25% adjustments for 2 years, possibly even more. It depends, obviously the analysis would be redone at that time. But that operating fund is still pretty low in fiscal year 29, even with a 25% revenue adjustment. But it's a path towards getting you to where you want to be by year 10 if you chose to delay any changes to the wastewater rates at this time. So similarly to the wastewater, we allocate the revenue requirements between flow and customer now. There's no more strength component because that's That's LISWA's job. So based on that, we're recommending adjusting the wastewater rates a little bit. So your current wastewater rate structure, you have a monthly charge per equivalent dwelling unit of about $32. And residents are equal to 1 EDU. And then non-residential customers, their EDU numbers are based on, are determined by the city. In addition to that, commercial customers are currently charged a volumetric component based on the strength of their wastewater. And that's one of the reasons why we are proposing a slight change to the wastewater rate structure, because now the city is collection only. So we don't want to keep a rate structure that includes strength components when you don't have strength component related costs. It's all just flow through the pipeline to the treatment plant. So now we have LISWA that now provides the treatment. And they have a charge that's defined per wastewater treatment and reclamation unit. So that charge would be on all the customer bills. And then the city is collection only, and we're gonna have revised rates that reflect that it's now a collection only system. And then the future bills would show those two charges on the bill. So our proposed wastewater rate structure is to continue charging residential and at an equivalent dwelling unit and 1 equivalent dwelling unit. The big difference is on the non-residential side. They'd no longer be charged on an EDU basis. It would just be on volume. And we're separating out parks from other non-residential because they have a distinct enough user characteristic from other commercial. They're highly irrigation, so much lower return to sewer than other commercial customers. We want to reflect that class difference there. So we have different volumetric charges for parks versus other non-residential. However, all non-residential would be subject to a minimum charge. So if their volume in a particular month times the dollar per 1,000 gallon rate was not equal to the residential charge, then they would be charged that residential charge. So this shows the proposed rate schedule out the 5 years. So the monthly collection charge per EDU for residential customers, and then the usage or volume charge for the non-residential and for the parks. You can see there's actually, because of the cost of service, even though we're proposing a 4% revenue adjustment with a change in the rate structure, the unit rates actually go down a hair. So that's the good news of the evening, maybe. And then as with the other ones, the fiscal year 24 addresses the revenue adjustment as well as our cost of service analysis and the revised rate structures. And the subsequent years are the prior year times the revenue adjustment. So fiscal year 25 is 5% greater than fiscal year 2024. And then for reference, we've also shown the LISWA treatment fixed charge that will be on customers' bills. So for a single family residential customer, their bill might look something like this. We have the collection charge of about $31.60. We have the monthly LISWA treatment charge of about $34.50 for a total bill of about $66. So that is, about a doubling of the total bill when you add the two together. And when we look at comparison agencies, again, the city of Lincoln with these adjustments would be falling kind of in the middle of the mix, so not an outlier for either water or wastewater that we're seeing. And now I'd like to invite my colleague Sarah up to talk about solid waste.
Thank you, Teresa. For the record, my name is Sarah Neely. I was the lead analyst doing the solid waste enterprise rate study with the direction of Terry Bovary, who was our project director. So similar to water and wastewater. Sorry about that. We conducted, sorry about that, a financial plan, and we just want to jump into a little bit of a background that we did with the partnership of city staff. And what I really want to focus in on this slide is the chart is the red and green chart on the right-hand side of the screen. It really speaks to what Teresa was talking about earlier. When we're looking at a solid waste financial plan or a water and wastewater financial plan, we are looking at our revenue requirements and our gross revenues, and we're looking at how much of the pie do we need to be recovering. And so specifically, and this is a chart that I'll reference over the next few slides, and we're looking at specifically with our revenue requirements, we're looking at our operating expenses, we're looking at any existing debt that the system is holding, as well as working capital and transfers that'll be affecting the system. And then on the opposite side with the green, with the gross revenues we're looking at for the solid waste system, they recover most of their costs through the monthly fee, as well as their fairly minimal other fees and income that the solid waste system brings in. And so just a little bit of background before we jump in even further, the fees have not increased for solid waste since fiscal year 2017. And there's been significant rises in inflation and cost since 2017. And we have seen that reflected in our operating costs. We've seen that in our capital costs as well for the system, and as well as for the same for water and wastewater. And this is important because the key study objective here was to develop fiscally sustainable fees that are equitably recovering the cost of service from our customers. And so to do this, and throughout the study, we really focused in on reviewing our customer statistics, those operating expenses and projected capital needs, and what we needed to do to recover that while distributing the cost equally to recover that cost of service. And following the same format with water and wastewater, we want to give you a little bit of an overview of how our revenues are funding the solid waste system operations. I just spoke a little bit about how costs have been increasing, and you can see that the disposal costs, our other operating costs, which really is composed of our fuel, our maintenance, as well as insurance and personnel, each make up almost a third of our total costs. The operating expenses for solid waste is a little bit over $8 million. And for reference, disposal accounts for about $3.4 million from this fiscal year 2023 budget, and personnel makes up about 2.4. So you can see these are the largest components that we are looking as far as our revenue requirements. As well as getting into, so we just talked about what our costs are recovering. We also wanted to just give you a little bit of a system services overview. Our residential customers receive a one bin, they're under a one bin system, and they receive weekly collection. They also receive every other week collection for that yard waste or green waste. And commercial services, that level of service varies as far as frequency and is based on demand. Following that, that services overview, this is an important side for our service requirements, because this is something where I will be referencing when we get into our cost of service discussion. But this was key for us to know in that financial plan and in our revenue requirements, what type of routes are we running by service line, as well as what type of staff is needed to cover those routes. And so we looked at the 6 garbage residential routes. There's 2 residential green waste or yard waste routes. The organic waste route is a commercial route that's run one time. That's one route that's run one time a week. And then as well as there's 3 other commercial routes. And so as we looked at this, and as I'll speak to you a little bit later in the presentation, is we looked at allocating those costs by residential and commercial, and how those costs should be recovered equitably among the customer classes. And at the bottom, you see that there is almost a catch-all that has a supervisor as well as 4 additional staffing. And I'll speak to more about this later, but we looked at the supervisor in a overhead sense. We looked, and as well as the additional staffing, to where they were spending the most of their time and what their function was for the solid waste enterprise system. And now that we have a little bit of an overview, I'd like to jump into the key assumptions. And this is going to be following that same chart that I referenced, that red and green gross revenues and the revenue requirements. And the first thing we looked at was the customer statistics. And these are based on their customer billing reports that we received working with city staff. That was also from their own reports, as well as reports from Western Placer County, as the city has an agreement with Western Placer County Waste Management Authority, and that is where we send all of our waste from the city. And so with that, I'd like to focus the attention on the projected annual waste generation graph on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. And this provides a breakdown of all the waste generation that is coming through the system and that is being sent to Western Placer County. And you can see that, and for fiscal year 2023, we're a little bit under 35,000 tons per year, and it grows to be a little bit under 40,000 tons per year. And it's important to note that we assumed the same growth rate here at 2% for both the customer accounts and waste generation. And that is aligned with water and the water and wastewater models. The little table on the left-hand side just shows you a little bit of a breakdown of our customer statistics. As far as our residential customers, we have about 19,400 single-family customers that have one cart or one bin, and 951 of those have two carts. And then we have about 1,000 non-residential customers that have between 1 to 4 90-gallon cans, as well as 3 to 5 yard bins. And again, this customer statistics helped us build our projections, both for our projected operating expenses, which I will be jumping into next. The operating expenses, this is a very large part of our model in our study, and this is heavily based on the fiscal year 2023 budget, as well as input from city staff. And I'd like to, if we look at the chart on the right-hand side, that projected operating expenses by budget cost center, the budget cost center may not mean as much to you. So to try to delve a little deeper, that the large navy bar that you see that makes up the majority of the cost, that goes back to the disposal cost that we talked about a few slides ago, that was that 33% of the total systems cost, that 3.4 million that is continuously growing over the course of the forecast period. It also accounts for personnel, that 2.3, 2.4 million that I spoke about as well. Those are the largest cost drivers that the solid waste system has as far as our operating expenses. It's important to note here that all capital outlay was reflected in the CIP, and this is only, we're only speaking about operating expenses at this point. And one other important item to note is through discussions with the city's staff, we made sure we looked at the budget and we were looking at, were there any one-time operating costs which as we were projecting outwards, in order to make sure we are capturing things appropriately and not overstating our costs that need to be recovered. And over the course of the forecast period from fiscal year 23 to 28, we are seeing a compound annual growth rate of 5.5%. I just mentioned that we did not include any capital outlay in our operating costs. And so now the next part of our revenue requirement, and following that red chart going down, is the capital improvement program. And Lincoln's capital improvement program is primarily driven by their fleet cost. 74% of the capital plan is related to the fleet and purchasing new vehicles to have for the different routes that are needed to provide an adequate level of the desired adequate level of service for customers. And that's followed by facilities, which is about 17%. Your facilities are include in this capital improvement plan a new recycling center. That's one of the largest components as in this plan, as well as carts, and that's your new carts to account for growth, as well as the replacement carts for current customers, whether it's damaged or just they've reached the end of their service life. It's important to note that for the solid waste system, that the capital is funded from reserves and from future revenues. No debt is assumed in the forecast, but about $1.9 million is assumed of PFE funding for new systems, which was that recycling center that I mentioned, as well as equipment for new customers, new and expansion customers for carts and trucks. Our average spend is about 1.5 million through fiscal year 2028. And it's also important to note that while there's been some pending legislation about fleet electrification coming from the state, that no garbage truck electrification was assumed in this forecast. And that was a decision that we rejected by after discussions with city staff, that based on where the electrification technology is now, that while it would eventually where it is at this point, that it is very likely that this legislation will be postponed from the original about 2027 timeline out into later years. And that for customers now, that if we were to assume electrification of our fleet, then we would, to account for the same level of service and that 1-for-1 for every one diesel or gas powered truck, that we would have one electric vehicle, that we would need to add additional vehicles to be able to account for the amount of households that we are currently hitting with each route, as well as we would have to add some additional FTEs. And so at this time, that was not considered in the forecast, and through our discussions. And through that capital improvement plan, I won't run through all these different bullets, but it's really key that the city carries out their capital improvement plan to meet their desired level of service for their customers. They have just invested in a new routing software. This will be able to help them establish more efficient routes. We mentioned that cardboard recycling facilities that will be that will help the recycling operations citywide, as well as a fleet replacement management program that'll help ensure continued reliability of their vehicles and help them reach their routes in a efficient and effective manner. And this is the last item on our revenue requirements, and following down that red side of the original chart. And this is our minimum cash reserve targets. We have 2 reserve targets, both on our operating and our capital reserves. Our operating reserves is targeting 90 days of operating expenses for working capital. And this is something that is considered fairly standard across solid waste enterprises across the nation. And we also are looking at our capital reserves, and we are targeting 1 year's worth of CIP, the average 1 year of annual CIP expenditures. And the goal is to provide sufficient cash reserves to appropriate for future capital funding. And so you can see on the bottom chart, it gives a little bit of a breakdown between our operating reserves versus our capital reserves and our total reserve target. And I'll speak to this very shortly, but it's also important to note that in this forecast, that we are drawing down our cash reserves in order to phase in our rates and the recommendation that is coming. Jumping in, so now that we've gone through all of our key assumptions, we've gone through the background, just giving you following the same format, we're giving you some financial plan scenarios, starting right off the bat with our status quo or baseline. And this chart gives you a look at what would happen if we continued on this path with rising costs with the capital plan, but without any rate increases. And you can see you make it through fiscal year 23 and 24 as you're cutting it very close in 25. But starting through 26 through 28, the fund goes negative. and it's not a sustainable or viable option for the city to pursue over a long period of time. Our second scenario is that phase is a phased increase, which is recommended. This is where we are looking at a phased increase over 3 years. And that chart on the bottom right-hand side shows you how that we are drawing down our cash reserves in order to make this more palatable and more palatable for the end customer. And we're drawing that while we are drawing the reserves down, that we are still meeting our reserve targets in every year. And it's also important to note that on the left-hand side with our revenue requirements, that in order to phase this in and while we are drawing down our reserves, that through the proposed revenues, that we will not be fully funding the revenue requirements until 2026 from the rate revenues. And so now, after we've given through the financial scenarios, we'll jump a little bit into the solid waste rate design. Again, it'll follow a very similar format to water and wastewater. Jumping right into the proposed solid waste rate schedule. The chart on the screen right now is the proposed collection rates for residential customers. And backing up a little bit, the cost of service, how we looked at the cost of service portion for solid waste was we first looked at water costs that are relative to our residential customers versus our commercial customers. So that was step one. And then step two, after allocating those costs, we looked at, okay, what are these costs attributed to? We looked at how could be allocated amongst the routes. And that was the chart that was the graphic we looked at earlier with the 6 residential garbage routes. We looked at the green waste, we looked at the different commercial routes. And from there, we also looked at the FTEs, what FTEs time could be allocated to each service line and to the different customer levels. And from there, we also looked at diving in further, and we looked at disposal costs and how are we allocating these disposal costs. And the key takeaway here is that for our residential and in general, that the rate structure and the cost of services that we analyze is fairly in line with the city's current rate structure. And so these rates that are on the screen right now, the residential, they follow that 13%, they follow our cost allocation as well as that 13% rate increase over the 3 years and the 3% in the final 2 years. I'll also share this is our non-residential collection rates, and this is specifically looking at a monthly charge for the non-residential commercial customers that have 90-gallon carts ranging from 1 to 4, depending on their level of service. And again, this rate structure is fairly, through our cost of service analysis, rate structure is fairly aligned with what the city currently has. And in a little bit of a contrast to that, and just a slight adjustment here, when we're looking at our non-residential collection rates for our commercial bins and commercial compactors, this is where where our largest shift was, and from the city's current rate structure. And that's due to, we had looked at when we were allocating the cost, specifically the disposal cost, we looked at the commercial compactors can have a much higher waste generation assigned to them than an uncompacted bin. And the EPA has guidelines that we have followed here, looking at waste density, and compactors have about a 2-to-1 ratio in density to an uncompacted compacted bin. And so through that, and because the rate structure right now for commercial compactor customers, it's a charge by pickup, we allocated 2 times the disposal costs to the compactors that we did to the commercial bins. And so that's why this is where you will see the largest shift from our current rate structure and through our rate increases. The next thing I would like to show you is just a neighboring comparison for Lincoln. And we at the bottom too, the darker blue charts, the darker blue bars, with all of this in mind, talking about the revenue requirements or rate adjustments. We wanted to show you where Lincoln aligns with its neighboring communities as far as a single family residential customer. And right now, the current rate is $26. And you can see it is the lowest charge amongst all the peers. And even with the proposed increase, that it is still, it is aside from Sacramento, who will possibly be updating the rates in the next year. That as far as to our knowledge now, it is still at one of the lowest rates in the area. And one more thing to note, that each of these rates, that some of these municipalities are conducting rate studies this year and will be raising rates in fiscal year 24. But these rates on the screen are as of fiscal year 23. And now I'll turn it back to Teresa to go over some combined bill impacts.
Thanks, Sarah. So we wanted to bring this all together across the three enterprises, and then across the agencies or the cities that were comparable across all three enterprises. So we have the city of Roseville, Rockland, which is served by PCWA, SP Mud, and Recology, as well as the city of Woodland. And so these are reflective of the scenario 2 in the water options, and then the 4% increase on the wastewater option. And so you can see the city of Lincoln is in the middle pack again, a little bit higher than Rockland, but kind of on par with them. So the next steps is seeking your approval for specific rate schedules to move forward with on a Prop 218 notice. And also we are planning to conduct some additional community meetings during the 45-day period, noticing period. Thank you. Like, what is that word? And so thank you again for letting us present this information to you. And we're just going to leave you with this slide, which actually adds another year in there, though somehow the city of Rockland fiscal year 23 magically disappeared. So I apologize for that. Thank you.
Thank you both. That was an incredible amount of information, very comprehensive, and for me at least, I think for the rest of the council, more approachable than anything we've seen in the past. So I'm very grateful for that. Go ahead and bring it back to the council for any questions they might have. Dan, you want to start us off? Okay. Holly?
I don't. Thank you. That was very good.
Bill?
That was an exhaustive presentation. I don't have any questions.
He said exhaustive, not exhausting. Very different. Okay. I have a question, I think really for Sean, and we've discussed this a little bit on water rates. How is Roseville able to hold their rates so steady over those 3 years?
I have theories, so I'm just saying that these are theories. Part of it's
PCWA is in the room and does provide water to Roseville to some degree.
yeah, so I suspect they could maybe speak to some of that. I suspect that there's two main components that I identified. One is that obviously there's a difference in the power rate that they are paying. You know, water and sewer to some degree, to a large degree, require a lot of energy to run lift stations and run pumps and well and peaking reservoirs, and that's a fancy word for well, and wastewater plants. And we do not have that luxury. We are under PG&E, as we've discussed, and so that certainly is part of the delta. Another component to it is that depending on how you structured your utility over a really long period of time, there is a benefit to being part of a much larger system where lots of people are paying into that pie, you do achieve eventually some economies of scale that can drive down the cost for everybody else. It's Mayor and I were discussing it the other day, is the McDonald's concept. The more excess product that you can purchase in bulk, the cheaper you can sell it for. And so there is some component to that as it relates to Roseville. And as I've looked at their studies, because that data point for me really stuck out. That's about as much as I can discern from the studies I've read.
I appreciate that very much. I'm gonna go a little bit down a rabbit hole, and forgive me for this with respect to the 74% fleet replacement cost. Sounds like we were assuming electrification, but I don't think that's the requirement. I think the requirement is clean, is
That's
zero emissions. by
correct.
2035.
So it
And
could be,
hydrogen is what would make more sense in this type of fleet. Consider that.
I believe it can be a variety of different things, electric vehicles, hydrogen powered vehicles, which are starting to become a thing. And then I think even CNG is compressed natural gas is an option. A lot of cities tried to do that many years ago. The Air Board tried to push that, and the problems obviously were the fill was very slow, and then the fast fill station. The other problem that you have from a public works perspective, and Matt could probably speak to this, is fleets that have compressed natural gas have to carry very, very large tanks in the beds of their trucks. There's two problems with that. You lose a lot of space, they're heavy. And two, you got to secure them really well because it's combustible material. And so you really don't want to get in a car accident and have it go boom. So there are a lot of options that we'll have, but we felt that the primary issue isn't really the funding and acquisition of those, whatever vehicle we choose to go with. It's that we don't believe that the market, specifically as it relates to solid waste, is really caught up with the demand that's coming as a result of this regulation.
I think that's true. My other concern there would be, as we convert to whatever it is, will our maintenance staff have the ability to work on those vehicles?
We have a really good fleet staff, and so I'm sure that they will be trained appropriately to get there, but it is an issue. You want to speak to that a little bit, Matt?
Yes, I do believe we'll be capable of that. And recently we have discussed in the future pulling back some contracts and looking into an instrumentation and SCADA tech in the future that would provide some control support for the electrical systems. That's something that we'll be talking about in the distant future. Sean hasn't heard about it yet. But yeah, we do believe that our staff's capable. We'll have the software support to service those vehicles. So we do believe that we will be able to service more complex vehicles in the future.
I think that's all I have for the moment. Dan, did you want to go, or would you like me to bring the public up into this? All right. We'll go ahead and do that. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this item? Let's see. Yep.
Hi, I'm Neil Cochran, and I moved to Lincoln, my wife and I, 2 years ago. Prior to that, we lived for a number of years up in Forest Hill, up the hill in the mountains. And I was fortunate or unfortunate there to be an elected member of the Public Utility District. And so we came down here 2 years ago, and I immediately looked up the rates for water and trash. Didn't have to pay sewage up there because we didn't have a treatment plant. And I looked at the rates on the website and I thought, we were paying $95 for water up there. And we were paying more than these numbers for waste, solid waste. I looked at your rates in Lincoln, and I thought, these guys know something that we don't know up in Forest Hill. Their rates are much lower than we could achieve. And as a member of that board, I spent months studying budgets, water rates, water usage, and costs, and depreciation, and reserves, and maintenance. And try as we could never get down to anything approaching half of what we were having to charge. I didn't pay too much about it since then until recently. And I heard about this water study. And I started looking into the budget here. And I realized that for water operations, on your budget for this year that ends the end of this month, your expenses equal about $22 million in the budget. Your revenues are only 17 million. So I saw a $5 million hole in the budget. And so I knew the money had to be spent, had to be covered. So obviously money was coming from somewhere else, from reserves or from other revenues like property taxes and sales taxes. And I then realized that maybe we weren't not as smart as you folks were. And it came back to me then that 10 years ago when I went on that board, we had the same exact problem there that I think you're experiencing here. We weren't charging enough. We spent the reserves, or previous boards had done so, and then bailed out. And that's why they had a new board, spent all the reserves, and were essentially headed for bankruptcy. And so we had to have more money or go out of business and be taken over by PCWA or a private water company like Cal Water. And if that happened, we knew that the rates would go to $150 if a public agency came in and took over, excuse me, a private agency. So all I can say is that I finally was glad to see that we did know what we're talking about when we somehow convinced the public to double their rates, because we were charging about what you are at that time, 10 years ago. And so I would encourage the board to pursue this. Your problem is to convince the property owners to not protest. And it's going to take a lot of education and work on the point of everybody in this room if that's going to happen. I would encourage you to take that step. It's going to be a hard row. But I will say this, if you do convince the public, like we were fortunately able to do, when we gave this same presentation to the public up there at the same kind of meeting, they clapped because we had convinced them that they needed to do this. They needed to not protest this and support it. And within 5 years, we had recovered. So how long it took. So with my blessing and support, I'd be glad to talk to anyone else who wants to hear about our experience, and wish you the best of luck. I won't be down here to protest.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very
We may
much.
take you up on your offer, by the way.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Anyone else in chambers wishing to speak on this item? Anyone online, Glenn?
Yes, we do. Hal High Tech. Please go ahead. Hal, can you unmute yourself? There.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Hal Atack. I am a 20+ year resident of Sun City, Lincoln Hills, and I have 2 quick questions on slide 64. Actually, I can just talk about it. You don't have to go to that slide. It's about LISWA. The first question is, in that table, it says the current fees for LISWA, all customers, is $22.79. I do not see it on my bill. And my second question is, were we not treating water before? Is this something new? Why we see this charge?
Okay, we can address those. The simplest answer, I'll turn it over to staff to answer, it, but the simplest answer is that we recently formed a JPA, which is LISWA, and so things are being handled in two separate categories now.
So you were
Yeah.
treating before.
Yes, we were treating wastewater previously, but as Mayor Joyner stated that LISWA was formed December 1st, taking over the ownership and operation of the treatment plant. So you're not seeing that charge on your bill as of the moment because LISWA has yet to levy that charge to the city. We can't pass something along to our customers that has not been given to us. And so that's why that charge is not there.
Okay,
And
that-
in communications with the general manager, it may be that we do not see a charge from them until July 1st, in which you would see that charge at that point.
Okay, then maybe I can rephrase my question because you're saying we have been treating water. So then from 2023, where the total fee was $32, including water treatment, it goes up to 60 something, including water treatment. So there's a big delta from year to year. Although we have been treating all along, now we have a new entity. Is it because there is new capital expenditures or what?
No, it's very simply because that we were not collecting enough to cover both the treatment and the collection portion of the service. And so if
Okay.
you recall the slide that Teresa demonstrated, where you would see almost twice the expenses as of the revenues collected. Well,
Yes.
that was before LISWA. That's not now. That was before LISWA. And so as a result, we just weren't collecting enough revenues. We have almost enough revenues to handle just collections. So we're asking for a small increase in that, but we
Yeah.
don't have enough revenues to cover the pass-through charge from LISWA. And if the city was still performing the treatment functions, then we would be looking at a very, very significant increase to these rates of over 100%.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hal. Anyone else?
No other hands are raised, Mayor.
So Sean, you've done 4 or 5 meetings along the way in various communities. We don't have a lot of folks that have asked questions here, but I'm going to guess you had some very interesting and appropriate questions that were asked of you. If you'd like to go over a few of those.
Sure. The most frequent question is, why did it take you so long to get around to doing this? I think the thesis, which is generally correct, is had the city been keeping up with regular incremental rate increases over the past 10-year period, we would be in a different position today, and that's 100% correct. As I said when we started this, it's a worthwhile question to address. It doesn't really solve the problem today, but to more specifically address it, if I'm going to make this brief, but hang with me for a moment. If you go back to the early 2010s, there was a significant drought in California that everybody remembers, and it went on for a number of years. And at that time, it was very common for communities, and they were actually being encouraged by Sacramento and the governor at the time, to institute, and I'm using a term that I use, it's not commonly accepted in the rate world, but essentially it's punitive rates, which are the idea being that if you want to set up a rate structure that penalizes really large water users to disincentivize them from using as much water to conserve. And a number of cities, especially cities that are in different positions than we happen to be here, did institute those rates. And then in 2015, am I right about that?
Yes.
San Juan Capistrano San Juan Capistrano Taxpayers Association versus the City of San Juan Capistrano was a case that was appealed and heard at the District Court of Appeals. And a judge found that those types of rate structures are not compliant with Prop 218. Christine reminded me something I completely forgot the other day, that it was such a controversial decision at the time that Governor Brown actually wrote an amicus brief arguing that cities should be allowed to institute these kinds of rates because he viewed it as just so important to the conservation that was needed at the time. Nonetheless, decision stood, and I remember it at the time because it was like a bombshell went off all across California for a lot of those agencies that had those rates in place, Lincoln being one of them. Fast forward a few years, and Lincoln was involved in litigation related to those rates, eventually settled that suit, and went through about a 2-year period of claims where refunds were issued to the community, ratepayers rather, during that time frame. In addition, what occurred, because those rates were found to be incorrect, there was a rollback essentially to really old historical rates from the early 2010s. What is not accurate is the narrative that during all of that time, the city was just sort of blindly walking around unaware of the problem. Based on our research, for a number of years after 2016-17, the city contracted for rate studies and failed once, tried again to get rates implemented. I've said at a number of these public meetings that if there is a failure, and it's easy to point fingers, I would estimate that the failure was that when rates were not successful, that staff at that time didn't turn right around and continue to work to get something that was sustainable moving forward. Anything between then and now, even if it was just small incremental increases, would have put us in a slightly different position. But frankly, when you're talking about a 10-year period and you factor in inflation into that over the last little bit, you end up in this kind of position. It also doesn't really take into account regulatory changes that have, on the solid waste side at least, have completely changed the nature of how we're providing this service. So that has been my kind of long answer to that question. The other question I've received is, what are we going to do about those folks in our community that can't afford it? And if you figure, based on the chart you saw, that an average bill is roughly $100, and it's going to go up to potentially $165, $170, we are not tone deaf to the reality that there are some in our community that are going to have a really tough time affording that. And Proposition 2, so the question has been, can we do something about that? Can we give a break to maybe low-income seniors or low-income people in our community? The answer to that is Prop 218 doesn't really allow you to subsidize other people's rates with, for example, the rates that I pay or Christine pays or any of you pay. However, there are other options. One idea we've explored a little bit is you can take penalties and interest on bills that aren't paid on time, reconnection fees, et cetera. You can put that into a set aside account. I've done programs like that in the past where people can apply and they can get, essentially a voucher to receive some amount of money off of their bill as a subsidy. There's some options that the council could explore as it relates to your American Recovery Act dollars to seed some money to help. But frankly, over the really long term, eventually we need to get these rates to a point where that's sort of the standard that most people are paying in our community. And the reason we threw those bar charts up at the end is we wanted to give the community a general view that we're right in the pocket of where most other communities are charging for those services. And my concern as your city manager would be that absent that or less than that, we are going to be right here having this discussion again next year, the year after, and the year after. So it's about charging the absolute appropriate minimum amount to do what we need to do to provide the service and nothing more. And we think we're there. Question for the council tonight really is, what of those two options essentially do you think is the best to move forward with?
So you're looking for direction from us, a recommendation of which of those two options we want to move forward, and then for us to give you direction to initiate the 218 process, correct?
Yeah, so to lay it out simply, in water, you have three options: nothing, not recommended; the course correction option, which is the 84% plus threes thereafter, and then the spread approach, which Raftellus did a good job explaining. So that's part one. Part two is sewer collections. That's really the one option or nothing. And the third is solid waste, which is really, I'm sorry. Solid waste is small incremental increases. I think they were mostly 3 and 4%ers, or you don't do anything and you wait 5 years and you may be looking at 25% for a few years at your next rate. And then solid waste, the third option is the one option you have, or do nothing. Our recommendation, just to be really clear, is if you want to set up your utility for success moving forward, we would recommend the more aggressive approach in water, the incremental increase approach in collections, and the recommended one option available in solid waste.
Thank you for that. Any discussion from the council?
I don't see any way out of not recreating our problem if we don't step up and right the ship. I do believe that we should try to come up with some, since that's a big first step, try to come up with some methodology for providing, if we can legally and financially, some support for low income people. That's, I'd like to give staff that direction if we go this way. And I really, you want to vote, don't you? You don't want consensus,
This is not an action item.
isn't it?
It is.
Oh,
There's no resolution attached
yeah, your
to
vote.
this item.
It's not a public hearing this evening because your actual legislative action will be after the 45 days. So what we really need this evening is, what do we notice out with the 45 days? Because we want to make sure people know, they need a surety about what is it that I'm protesting or not protesting.
Correct.
Yeah. And Mayor, the Public Works Director has been itching to say something, so.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, as the Public Works Director, obviously representing this group, I just wanted to acknowledge the staff and just the city that has continued to provide this top tier level of service to our customers. We routinely get thank you notes. We get, lots of accolades and thank yous in person for the services that we provide. And these adjustments were very measured adjustments in the rates. The percentages are high, but we're actually easing into investing in CIP for future sustainability. So that our staff and the city can continue to provide those top tier rates. We're easing into the CIP funding in about maybe the 50 to 65% range of what we need to do. We're going to be easing into 1 mile of replacement per year, which is less than 1% pipeline replacement. Both water and sewer have over 200 miles of pipeline. The water system has more than 5 miles of pipeline that have exceeded their useful life. They're over 75 years old. We have about 11 miles of sewer pipeline that's already over 75 years old. We're starting at the 1 mile per year pipeline replacement for the first 5 years, which is this rate period. Then we're stepping it up to 2 miles per year. We need to get to 3 miles per year eventually. We're well aware of that, but at least we'll start making this will be a really positive step in a direction to where we feel for this next rate period, we can continue to provide top tier services, minimal water outages. And we believe that this is the requested rates are very appropriate and that we were very conscientious of the impact to our community. We just want to be able to be equipped to provide that top tier service that everyone's accustomed to and not have a drop off in the 5-year look ahead.
Mayor, two more really quick things that were common questions. I just want to make sure I get on record. First one is, it's a reasonable question. Okay, Sean, you're the city manager. How would you cut if you can't get the rates? And my honest answer is I cannot cut the service. I cannot cut this, a large portion of our costs of staff. I can't cut the staff and maintain service. We'll use an example. Water department has 8 employees, 8. So that's for
For a population of
50,000 people. So if let's say Matt's crew has a water leak and he needs to send 4 over there, that's half your crew that's off, that's not serving the 50,000 people that are living in your community that day. So, and I can tell you, I've worked in a number of other communities that were roughly half the size of this one that had roughly the same amount of water staff. So we're very efficient with how we do our work. A lot of that has to do with our partnership with other agencies like PCWA and how we get how we get that water. But that's the answer as it relates to cutting. Cutting would include service reductions, and I don't know how you really reduce service practically in water and sewer. It's not really possible. Garbage, you can do it, but I just tend to feel that our community is not going to be accepting of, getting their garbage picked up every 3 weeks. I know I won't. I'll have to figure something out. I have a lot of baby diapers that go into that trash can every month. So
And didn't you say those 8 staff also do streets?
that's right. The 8 staff also do streets too. So we combine services there to try to realize some savings. Second question, which is another reasonable one. I know it's come up a number of times, is why don't you outsourcing more? Outsource garbage, outsource water operations. Totally can do that. But what we wanted to show you on that chart as it related to solid waste is this misnomer, I think, that it's necessarily cheaper to do so. Rockland outsources garbage. You saw that their rates are higher than ours. A number of other jurisdictions that were on that chart use outsourced haulers to do that work, and it's not necessarily cheaper. And there's a component of local control and customer service that I think you miss at some point. So that was the other main question that we received, which is reasonable and worth talking about.
It's something we've looked at in the past. The conclusion that we came to, I think Dan might slightly disagree with this, especially on solid waste collection. Once you lose the ability to provide that service for yourself, that initial contract might be good terms, but you can't rebuild that ability. And that next contract is going to hit you pretty hard and continue to do so. And we've, as a result, decided to do the best we can in-house. And I think the service level is pretty darn good. All right. I appreciate that.
I'm just going to reiterate what Dan said. I am in favor of the course correction path where we go to where we need to be to right the ship. But I also agree that we need to look at ways that we can help low-income seniors and families.
That wouldn't really be part of this action.
No, we're just saying.
And I was remiss in thanking everybody to put this package together. First of all, I don't think people realize we have attempted to complete a wastewater and solid waste study since 2017. We have amended a contract every year since then, and we have yet to have a completed study. We get the staff that we have now, and they pick the consulting organization they pick. And we have one in 6 months. There's something wondrous or magical. Everything came together.
So don't build that.
I've been involved in hours of discussions and seeing how hard everybody's working with this.
Yeah, it's been a really heavy lift while they are in the process of building LISWA, the JPA. So it's been a lot of work. So thank you guys very, very much.
Yeah, and I want to echo that, really for the public's awareness. Sean came on board about a year and a half ago. Much of his staff after that. In all the years that led up to him coming on board, you've already heard about the failed attempts to do these rate studies and to bring something forward. Sean and his staff recognized the need, pulled it together, and had that in front of us tonight. And I've told Sean more than a few times that for the first time in years, I'm able to sleep at night because I know the professionalism of your staff and that you've got this covered. So I want to thank you all very much for bringing this forward, for making a difficult decision fairly straightforward. And with that, I will go ahead if somebody wants to make a motion.
Yeah, I move that we give direction to what we have stated to
So option 2.
yeah, so.
The recommended.
Recommended what you just said.
Recommendation on every,
Mhm.
I second it.
Second, Gwen, roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Andriotta.
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskent,
Certainly.
Councilmember Lauritsen, and Mayor Joyner.
Yes. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 10B, Resolution 2013-109, approving the funding agreement between Placer County Water Agency, PCWA, and the City of Lincoln for construction of additional treated water capacity at the Ophir Treatment Plant and authorizing the city manager to execute the funding agreement MOU. Mr. Scully.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to our PCWA people back there for sitting through a couple hours of meeting. I'm going to give just a really brief historical context to this because this is a really big deal for Lincoln, specifically as it relates to our ability to realize community vision moving forward. Because what we've learned and never more relevant than today in California is that if you don't have water capacity, you can't do much of anything. Placer County Water Agency has been planning the construction of what's known as the Ophir Water Treatment Plant for more than a decade to meet the growing needs of Placer County and specifically South Placer County. We've been served adequately, excellently by PCWA, primarily by their Foothill Water Treatment Plant, which has been expanded a number of times, most recently in 2002. And that was partially a reaction to try to keep pace with just an exploding South Placer and Lincoln and Rockland in particular. And then, of course, as you all know, sometime thereafter, things come to a screeching halt. And I think at the time, there was an idea that Ophir would be built more than at least 8 years back. And as things in the development side came to a trickle, there was sort of a hitting of the brakes, which was okay in some senses because it gave PCWA the ability to really tee up the project for construction. More recently, we have been in conversations with PCWA as the city has collected for many, many, many years connection fees on all new development, anticipating this growing need for this new water treatment plant, which will on first phase create roughly 10 million gallons per day in capacity. Certainly not all of that for Lincoln, but will satisfy our needs for water capacity for the foreseeable future. So as we have a really great relationship with PCWA. I say all the time, they're one of my favorite agencies to work with, very professional staff. In fact, they're so put together, they kind of make me jealous sometimes. But they make life pretty easy when it comes to trying to work out some of these complex financing arrangements and how we're going to tee up the project for when we need it and when they need it. So over the past roughly 6 months, we've been working with their board and staff to try to figure out when the right time would be to contribute our very large bank account that's been saved for this purpose. And really about 6 months ago, we started to explore that PCWA is seeing the need and is ready to move on this project after a really long time. And so we've created a funding agreement, which is in your packet, which essentially would allocate and transfer $40 million, which is almost all of the water connection fees that we've collected to PCWA. They would take that, we're going to liquidate those securities into essentially cash, transfer that to PCWA. The plant isn't going to be built tomorrow, but in the next couple of years, it's anticipated. So the idea is that they will take our balance and they will invest that per the PCWA investment guidelines, which are very similar to what the cities have to operate under here in California. So conservative investments that have an estimated yield so that our money will continue to work for us until such time as they're ready to liquidate it and use it towards their project. So the question is why? Why not just hold it until that time? The reason is that they're transferring these funds to them, give them assurance that they have those dollars on hand to move on the project when they're ready. And that helps them defray financing costs. And financing costs on a project of this scale, well over $125 million, and that's not even including the $100+ million they've already spent to get the project site ready, can kill a project long-term, even at the bond rates that you can get in California. So what are the deal points? The deal points are we will transmit that funding, upfront funding for our share of capacity in the Ophir water treatment plant and downstream transmission pipelines. For that, and for that savings of anticipated financing costs, PCWA has agreed to basically pass on those financing costs to us in the form of a reduced water connection charge, which is currently roughly $18,000 and change to about $15,000 and change. So about 27% discount. From a business perspective, it's just a great deal to be able to buy in bulk and experience those savings moving forward. That water connection charge will increase over time per the construction cost index to make sure that we're keeping track with what we think the cost of the plant is going to be at some point. And also for that, when the completion of construction is done, we will start to assume roughly 400 units of connection yearly, which was our estimate of growth patterns. As I sit here today, I would tell you that I think that provided that the economy by that time is back to what we were experiencing, maybe pre-rate hikes, 400 is something I feel very comfortable with. If not, we have built in some language that if we're sitting here in 4 years and the plant is live and we are doing 200 units of connection worth, there's some language built in that I can get in touch with the general manager of PCWA and we can work out essentially a side agreement to temper that number down to something that's a little bit more reasonable. We had to include something because PCWA needs some assurance of when they're actually going to need to start delivering that amount of gallons per day that would be needed for those units of connection. That said, this really puts us in a position where we're reserving with this amount roughly 2.94 million gallons per day of treated water, which is roughly 2,500 and change of units of connection. So this is really step one. There will be future phases of this plan, and we likely will be investing, in future phases of this plant. PCWA has extremely old water rights and very good supply through more than one body of water. And so they're uniquely positioned to service us. And I think Tony, who's here in the audience, told me not all that long ago that Lincoln has become over time their largest wholesale client. And so we likely will continue to be that moving forward. It also gives us the ability to not do what a number of communities to the south of us have to do, which is plug wells or drill wells rather, and affect the groundwater table locally. We are sourcing from a completely different area. And so it puts us in a very different position as it relates to our environmental documents and future growth. So there are all kinds of strategic advantages. One little component I will point out of the agreement is that our partner capacity at phase one cannot exceed 5 million gallons. So there's a potential that we could a little less than double what we've contributed to reserve additional capacity as the community continues to grow. But for now, 2,500 units is going to keep us busy for a good long time, depending on growth patterns. There's a lot of other detail in here that I can go into if you like, but interest and dividends that are earned from their investment of our funds will be accumulated and credited towards our total balance. Expenses incurred for the management of those funds will be offset against those interests and dividends earned. And PCWA is going to report quarterly to us the type of investment, the issuer, purchase date, value, market values, stated rate and maturity of those investments, so that we make sure. They were very transparent about saying, look, we want to make sure you know that we're as good stewards of your dollars as you've been all these years, which is very much appreciated. And they have a very, very long track record of good fiscal management. Aside from that, I don't really have much to offer, except for we were excited to effectuate this marriage, for lack of a better term, and look forward to someday down the road being at that Ophir plant when they cut the ribbon. And I know that Primo Santini, who is our district rep on PCWA's boards here this evening, as well as Tony, and I'm sure will have comments.
You're putting them on the spot now, aren't you? So that was a great summation. Dan and I have served on the committee that's been discussing this with PCWA. So I think our questions and concerns have more than been addressed, but I wanted to open it up to the rest of the council. Do you have any questions? You have a comment?
I have a comment.
All right.
No, it dragged me down a rabbit hole. You say in the staff report, 27%. I wish it's 17%, isn't it?
Let me do the math. Hold on one moment.
I didn't. I just did the math. It's 17. That's what I thought.
Well, to answer it more eloquently, it's a little less than $3,000 difference between what we're paying and what we will be paying.
Holly, any questions, comments?
I have no questions. I'm in favor.
Bill? Nothing. All right. And I have no questions either. I think that, I've been around long enough, and others have as well, to remember a time when we were looking at the possibility of having to build 2 treatment facilities. And to be able to pare that down to this and have it more than cover our needs for the foreseeable future, I think is something to be commended. And I think the ongoing relationship between the city and PCWA really could not be any better. We've got some incredible partners in them. We're very grateful for that relationship, and I expect it only to get better over time. So with that, I will go ahead and open it up to the public. Primo, Tony, sounds like Sean threw you under the bus, so.
Well, you've been sitting there that whole time. You might as well say something, right?
Yeah, I get to join in the meeting. Yeah, thank you very much. Mayor and council members, I'm Tony Ferenzi with Placer County Water Agency, Director of Strategic Affairs. And I know all of you in different ways, but it's a pleasure to be here tonight for this item. And I'd also like to acknowledge it'll be a pleasure for me to also present this to our board of directors on Thursday, subject to your approval here tonight. And I did want to acknowledge Primo Santini, Director of District 2 that covers Lincoln. He's also a Lincoln resident, and I can tell you from my interactions with Primo over the years, cares dearly about outcomes for the city of Lincoln, and really enjoy my relationship working with Primo.
I will add to that, former council member and former mayor of the city.
Yeah, yeah. So you have good representation on the PCWA board. All I came prepared to say tonight on this item as I thought about it, because I knew Sean would cover all the details. I will add a little bit of specificity on that percent, but more importantly, what I really found in negotiating this agreement, typically you're looking towards some sort of compromise towards the middle on terms. That's what a negotiation is, right? Everyone's supposed to walk away equally unhappy. This negotiation didn't feel that way at all. It was really just looking for possible outcomes for both of partners in this, right? Sort of our respective outcomes that we were looking for. It wasn't a compromise. It was really just opportunistic. And what that really came to was Lincoln getting more return on its investment for your $40 million. And then for PCWA, we weren't necessarily looking for any kind of financial outcome as much as reduced borrowing liability, right? I mean, as government agencies, we're always trying to minimize our borrowing. I actually sure wish our federal government would do that. But at local level, that's what we do. And what you're helping us do is reduce our borrowing toll on us. And that's good for everybody. And I want to thank your staff, Sean, and thank also our water committee, the two electeds from each agency that sit on that water committee. It's been a pleasure. And you do have very professional staff. They're a pleasure to work with. Thank all of you. So that's it from me. Oh, the 27%. So I'll just say, and I like the way Sean said it, it's a $3,000 savings. Everyone understands what a dollar is. But technically, it's we've eliminated the borrowing costs on the treatment component of our connection fee, which is 27%. So it's 27% reduction on the treatment component, which is a little bit more than half of our connection fee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
I stand corrected.
You do stand corrected. Anyone else? Primo?
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Primo Santini. I'm the District 2 Director for Placer County Water Agency, and as Tony said, a proud Lincoln citizen for many, many years. I think I've said before, at least to some of you, that the big decisions are the easiest decisions because they kind of make themselves. And this is one of those. As Tony alluded to, the negotiation wasn't really that. It was a meeting of the minds more than a negotiation. And the terms are very simple. It's a very simple document. Thank Christine for writing it up for that. Very understandable, and I think of very much benefit to both entities. And I think that the ease of getting it done was a recognition that our customers, the people we serve, are also your constituents, the people that you serve too. And both entities were committed to doing the best for those same people. So I want to thank you for the process. It's been dealing with the city of Lincoln on this process was one of the more enjoyable interactions that we've had interregionally. And I think it goes to the other point that a lot of our regions, a lot of our problems cross boundaries. And I think that this is maybe a good example that the rest of the region can benefit from too, just looking at a cooperative approach to these things. So thank you. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Primo. Anyone else in chambers wish to speak on this item? Being none, anyone online, Gwen?
No hands are raised, Mayor.
All right, we'll bring it back up here for action.
Other comments?
Nope.
I move we approve resolution 2023-101, approving a funding agreement between Placer County Water Agency and the city of Lincoln.
Second.
Motion second, Gwen.
Yes. Councilmember Carlskin?
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta?
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen?
Yes.
And Mayor Joyner?
Yes. Good. We move on to item 10C, approve the strategic plan for 2023 through 2025, which outlines the specific goals as identified by the city council from the strategic retreat. So quick question. Do we want to take a 5-minute
Can
break
we?
here? Why don't we go ahead and recess for 10 and we'll come back.
Super.
right, we are back in session. Let's go ahead and do our final push here to wrap this up tonight. Item 10C, approval of the strategic plan for 2023 through 2025, which outlines the specific goals as identified by the city council from the strategic retreat. Mr. Scully.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna do my report from up here so I can control the media and also because my knees are clattering together, so I'm so cold. Okay, the city council, one of the things that's the most important to me, and I think the staff in general, is to have clear direction. And when I came on board a little over a year ago, it was, we were working off of an older strategic planning document that had been developed, I guess now probably 3.5 years, maybe more, pre-COVID. And it's a good document. It was one of the reasons why I applied for this position. I thought that I liked that it was broad and I liked that it wasn't very specific at the time. And then over the last year, I found some of the components, not the substance of it to be troubling. The lack of specificity became problematic. And by that, I mean that every day that every one of these folks comes into work, we have our core duties that take up 80% of our time, answering questions from the public, serving the public, little things, large things, staff, financial issues, personnel matters. Christian's department deals with everything from where can I put my fence to we want to build 5,000 homes, where do we do it? And so all of that is sort of our normal bread and butter everyday work. In addition to that, there are these strategic important projects that are kind of icing on the cake, so to speak. And over the past year, I think what we've been doing a lot was sort of retuning the organization and trying to address what we saw as immediate needs. Now, most, not all, but many of those have been addressed and handled by your staff and yourselves. And so this time around, our intent moving to a 2-year budget was to get a little bit more granular about what exactly we want to achieve so we can really pump resources in there and show you some results. So we hired a consultant that came in and did individual interviews with each council member to get an idea about your what's important to you, what's not important to you, goals that you'd like to see the city move towards, in an attempt to try to, before the group met, get a little flavor of where we want to go and who we want to be, what we want Lincoln to be. And so then the council met on across a 2-day session. I will say that I think those individual meetings end up being as important, if not more important, than the actual group session, because when you can sit alone with a person in a room and really talk, it helps that consultant get a kind of holistic view of how everybody feels. And then those issues were discussed at length over about a 1.5 days over at the library during your retreat. And it has all been compiled into the report you're about to see now. And I want to just take one moment to thank somebody, Christian in Public Works, who is a fabulous newer member to our organization, who is a absolute star when it comes to media design and outreach materials. And so I sent him the bones of basically the text of what we had come up with as a result of yours, and he put together what you see today. So I can't take any credit for it. He did all of it. And boy, am I glad that we have people that can do that kind of work. So I'm going to move through these goals really quickly because a lot of them are not going to be surprising to the council. This is primarily for the community that are listening or will watch in the future. Goal number 1, this was identified as the top priority. And they're not all in order of importance. This one is in order of importance. The city has as you know, a limited term tax sharing agreement with Placer County. One of the components of that agreement is that we are to go out to the voters for a revenue measure in order to effectuate the final years of that agreement. So it's as much a contractual requirement as it is a requirement of our future financial independence and necessity. We will, provided that this plan is approved tonight, we already have set the balls in motion to get that process started. And we'll be having a lot of conversation about that moving forward, what it looks like, when it's asked, how much is asked for, how we use those dollars, why it's important to our current staffing moving forward. We talked a lot about utilities tonight. The general fund, in most cities, you don't spend very much time on utilities. You spend a lot of time on general fund. We will get there. That's the time we need to spend. We need to find a way to retain the staff that we have and grow the general funded positions to provide the services that we've committed to providing in policy documents in the past. And if you need to stop me, please stop me. So I'm going to go through these quickly. Goal 2, utility rate studies. I like to joke about this. I don't know about anybody, but I like to do lists of things I need to get done during the day. And sometimes if I didn't put something on the list that I get done, I write it into the list and then cross it off immediately because it makes me feel better. That's kind of what you see tonight. Complete utility rate study, present to council, and proceed with the Prop 218 process. So your action earlier tonight puts us in really good position to get this goal completed. Third is prepare an economic development vision and plan for the city of Lincoln's future. There's some, each one of these has some sub bullets that sort of provide a little context. Your EDC, Economic Development Committee, has done something like this. And I think what we may do is take their work and have council weigh in to create a more global document for the organization. 4 is our downtown specific plan update. That process is already moving. As you know, we received a grant to do some of that work. And Efren Sanchez, one of Christian's staff, is taking the lead on that. And in fact, I think tomorrow we're going to be doing some outreach at Economic Development Committee, and he'll be hitting the road and talking to a variety of groups to get some buy-in. It's our first opportunity in a number of decades to redefine how we plan our downtown. Next is continue to develop an overall strategy to effectively address homelessness in Lincoln. Christine and I are like, I know we've said this a number of times, but I promise you, we are on the precipice of bringing you your pilot program. It's like super close. We're just waiting on a couple of commitments. And I suspect you'll see that in July. It's not simply our pilot program. It's trying to advocate for our regional partners, Placer County, and a number of nonprofits, to really create a system that isn't only dependent on Lincoln doing, the city of Lincoln doing all of that work. We'll fail otherwise. We need this to be a true community effort. And then, of course, there's a component in there about using council members to help lobby for that assistance. Goal 6 is the airport action plan. This is something that the airport committee has already kind of talked about, and it's. I'm so glad. I don't need another committee to go to be honest with you, but I'm really glad that you reformed the airport committee, because we're getting expert feedback from people that actually know aviation and what it's like to be at the airport and what we could do better. And it's already bearing fruit. And I suspect over the next number of months, we'll really come up with something holistic that the council can act on. Okay, unless we want to talk more about that, I think that sort of touches that.
Scratch this next one off right now.
Yeah, hey, this was easy. This was simply just a comment that was brought up by a couple council members that they really want to kind of make sure they're briefed on what's going on these external committees that you all serve on. And look, you all do a lot, and sometimes it's hard to remember to report all that back. And so what we've done is just added a section into your agenda so that to the extent you can share some brief highlights of your attendance to meetings or committees, that would be great moving forward. Big one, conduct a review of a city's general plan and then think about whether or not it's time to really amend that document. We talked about the cost of what that would take, and it's very, very expensive. It may be that when Christian and his team and the planning commission think a little bit about this, they recommend a more surgical update that just identifies a few areas that we can really improve. And we'll be bringing you that. I apologize, I forgot one thing. The previous 7 goals I just talked about are what we're calling priority group A, which means we anticipate completion of them generally this coming year, fiscal year. Excuse me, 20. Now we're in a 2-year budget. I screwed myself up. July of 23 through June of 24. One of the things that we discussed is that sooner or later, probably sooner, we are going to need to really start thinking about where we're going to house our police department. We are at capacity. The chief does a pretty good job of making do with what he's got over there, but sooner or later, especially with our anticipated growth, that building is going to be increasingly insufficient. So we've got to figure out what our next step is to create an accommodation for them. Conduct an analysis of the current and future city library service and facility needs. This not only relates to the 12 Bridges location, but it also relates to the Carnegie location, and getting to some kind of consensus after years of discussion about what are we doing with that building downtown? What do downtown library services look like? What can we afford? And the city council is going to have some really difficult decisions to make as it even relates to the 12 Bridges library location, as it takes a group funding effort with other outside agencies to make that place stay open. And so it all factors into that revenue measure as well. And so all of these things are interconnected. Conduct a feasibility study on the municipalization of electrical power in Lincoln. We are already working on this. This is a huge lift. If we can simply get you a feasibility study that's good enough for you to make some kind of decision and path forward, that'll be a huge win to us. There will be, I'll say this now so that when I say it in the future, I can say I said it. There's going to be a number of times through this process where you're going to be told, we should just quit now. It's not worth it. Too expensive, too hard. PG&E will never allow it. But other jurisdictions that have made it happen because they were tenacious and they didn't give up. And so minimally, we can get you something to review and you can make the decision with conversations with the community about whether or not it's worth our investment. Goal 12, begin early research for a future update on the city's lighting and landscaping districts. We talked about this last meeting. Our BADs, LADs, and LLDs all are, not all of them are a jumbled mess, but a number of them are in some trouble, and it's going to take some pretty honest discussions similar to the rate studies about how we're going to solve that, so we create equity in those different districts. Create a master calendar for required reporting, schedule contractual renewals and needed updates. This is kind of a transparency item that came up. We've made a lot of progress in financial transparency in the last year, but one of the things that was sort of interesting is there's a lot of routine contracts that get rolled over and then some that expire. And it was commented that it sure would be nice if the council and community had a central point where they could go see, oh, hey, Dominguez Landscaping's contract is up in 25, whatever it is. And so now I know that the city's probably going to be going out for a new contract then. That trickles down to even the smallest contracts that we have. So just another level of transparency. And goal 14, again, not in priority order, is to continue to monitor the Titan missile site remediation efforts and continue to provide communities or city support to see that through to its logical remediation. One thing we've learned, at least I've learned in sort of being a passenger in the process with the committee that's been working on it, is that it's going to take, much like the municipalization of power, tenacity and consistency over a really long period of time to continue to make it a priority for the federal officials to get it done. It won't happen if we scream and yell for a few months. We've got to be consistent for a number of years. And I think the council has acknowledged that the city has an important role in that as an advocate. And that's the end of the goals. This is not an exhaustive list. It can be changed anytime. It can be amended anytime. It can be deleted from anytime. But it gives us some structure of how we're going to plan our workflow for the next couple year period and budget appropriately for it. The discussion items we're throwing on here is not necessarily actionable, but something that council should think about discussing at length and maybe creating new goals through the process. One is council member roles and responsibilities. It's always a good thing to have that discussion regularly, especially as you have new members coming on board, so that it's clear to people that want to serve their community or that just watch these meetings. What does my council member do? What are their roles? What can they do? What can't they do? What are the expectations of how they interact with each other and members of the public? All of those things. I think they're important discussions to have as just good governance and typically are well received by the community. Street maintenance and improvements, we hear a lot about the condition of our roads and the limited resources we have to apply treatments to them. And so it's always going to be something we're discussing. And I think that we can get a little bit more granular in our method of how we're doing that work. And then park maintenance improvements, another hot topic here in town. How do we prioritize parks? We're very fortunate that we have on a comparative basis a lot of parkland in Lincoln, and the benefit of that is it's really great for the community. The downside of it is that the expectation is set that we have a standard of park that we want, and everybody to some degree deserves that level of park. So how are we going to make that happen with the resources that we have? And not to cut it too short, but that's pretty much it. That's your strategic plan. Provided you approve it tonight, it'll go right up on the website, and we will provide, I think we've committed as part of your quarterly budget looks, we'll be doing little informational updates to you of what kind of progress we're making on the various initiatives. And just a huge thank you to the council. I know it's a lot to ask, not only to have you sit in 2 days of meetings, but also individual sessions to really flesh this out and get on the same page. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, Sean, thank you for that. I'm amazed at the, not just the accuracy, but the effectiveness of your summation of those 2 days. It was your staff as well that sat in on that, and I felt as though they were very much part of that conversation. One of the things I wanted to come out of all of this with as a full plate for you, so that when any one of us 6 months down the road, a year down the road goes, hey, I got a great idea, I want to put this on your plate, you can very legitimately say, okay, we're willing to do that, but what would you like to take off the plate to allow us to be able to do that? And so hopefully this document gives you that ability. Any questions or comments from council? Anyone?
No, I thought that was, you're right, great summation. And I'm still thinking about the 2 days we spent together. I just felt it was so productive and so good for all of us to do that together. And so this is a great presentation to keep us on track, to remind us what we agreed that our goals were. So I appreciate that.
And just because this is effectively kind of a 2-year plan doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing this again in a year and going back.
Yeah, I apologize. I should have mentioned that. I think that at least after the first year, there should be a lack of a better term. This is something Christian says all the time, a tune up. So let's tune it up again. Some of this stuff may completely be irrelevant by then, and there will be other problems. As you know, every week there's some new thing that comes up. So I expect there will be other things.
Yeah.
All right, so you're looking just for council's approval, and
I approve. I like it.
do you need a vote on it, or just?
It would be nice.
Yeah, go ahead.
It would be nice.
Yeah, well, I make a motion that we approve the presented council strategies and goals for the next 2 years.
Second.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We also have a number of people still on. Nobody raised their hand, so. Yes.
One in the audience. I looked at Richard and nothing. All right.
So I'm reminded of a saying on the
Pull that mic
masthead.
down, Richard.
I'm reminded of a saying on the masthead of one of the nation's large newspapers, where there is no vision, the people perish. And the key word there is vision. If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. It's important to look out into the future. It's the way that we become, that we achieve our goals. What I really liked about the session, and I was there for all of them, is the fact that it was broken down into achievable components, and then you looked at the longer version, and then you brought it down, what can we accomplish within a short period of time? And I think that that's good management. I mean, the greatest business organizations are those that look into the future, those that don't never get there. And so I think that's a real change for, that Sean and the team is bringing, to this council. It's critical to look out into the future. And it's also critical to do true ups, as Sean just mentioned, in order to, find out where you're going to go. And are we still on mark? Do we have to adjust? So just kudos to all the staff. As a spectator there, it was rewarding, to see the collaborativeness between the staff and the council. It hasn't always been that way, of course, as we all know, but it was really good. So it was a great 2 days. As you know, it's hard to pull 2 days away, but well done. Thank you all.
Thank you, Richard. I think it was absolutely essential, especially after forced downtime of COVID, for everybody to get back in a room, reconnect, reset priorities, and move forward. Anyone online now?
Yes, no hands are raised, Mayor.
All
So,
right. So I do have a motion in a second. Let's go ahead and do it.
Councilmember Andriana?
Yes.
Councilmember Carlskin?
Yep.
Councilmember Lauritsen?
Yes.
And Mayor Joyner?
Yes. And we move on to 10D, adopt resolution 2023-110, approving the memorandum of understanding, MOU, between the Lincoln Police and Fire Mid-Management and Supervisory Employee Group, PFMM, and the City of Lincoln and related salary schedules. The estimated total increased cost over the full term of the MOU is $1,266,465.71. Veronica.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just as background, the Lincoln Police and Fire Mid-Management and Supervisory Employee Group, they consist of 9 staff that include the fire battalion chiefs, police sergeants, and a police lieutenant. The group's current agreement expired on June 30th, 2021, after a 4-year term, which takes them just about 2 years out of contract. And over the past 6 months, we have met with the group to negotiate a successor MOU. And on May 31st, 2023, we reached a tentative agreement. And this is for a 6-year successor MOU. And so this evening, I'm here to request approval for that agreement and the related salary schedules. The major elements of this proposed agreement are as follows. The term is it's retroactive to July 1, 2021, because as I mentioned, their MOU expired June 30th. So it'll go from July 1, 2021 through June 30th of 2027 for a 6-year agreement. There are several components involved in this MOU, but the major ones involve base wage increases. There will be 6 salary increases of 3% each on July 1 of each year from 2021 through 2026. That will be for all eligible employees in that MOU. Each employee will also receive a one-time non-pensionable lump sum payment of $10,000. They will also receive longevity pay of 3% of their base rate of pay once they serve 15 years with the city. Eligible employees will also receive an education incentive pay of 2.5% of their base rate of pay. As Mayor Joyner said, the estimated cost of this MOU is $1,266,466 over the term of the MOU, which is being paid for directly from the general fund. And the one-time lump sum cash payments and retroactive pay, which is approximately $123,000, will be funded out of the standard allowance revenues claimed by the city under the American Rescue Plan Act. And this agreement will have no fiscal impact to the current budget year since the increases won't begin until after July 1. And this concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions you might have.
Questions from the council?
Thank you for all that hard work. I really appreciate it. I just have one question, and it's not really related to the contract, but since you mentioned it, once we do this, the one-time payment out of the standard allowance fund, what's the balance of that? Okay,
I think that I'm doing really rough math in my head, but I think that the remaining balance that we have is in the 3.5 million range.
okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Remaining of the original 10 plus 1.8 restricted.
Probably a similar question, the retroactive portion. How is that dealt with? Is that all at once on that first check?
The
or is it-
retroactive payment, yeah, so once the MOU is effective, then it goes all the way back and they'll receive a payment. It will be in one check, yes.
And one thing to add, we don't usually go into this level of detail because it's been negotiating for a really long time, but I do think two things. One is a thank you to the group. What has been difficult for this particular group is they've been out of contract for nearly 2.5 years and with no COLAs, nothing. And have been very patient in waiting for us to work through agreements with other groups before we got to them. And so thank you to them for that patience. And secondly, Veronica spends, aside from just running HR at the City of Lincoln, which is a whole thing into of itself, a lot of time thinking through and working through some, potentially sometimes difficult discussions with these groups. And so she did a really great job to get us to the finish line.
Thank you for that. We don't recognize that often enough. Have any questions? No question. Bill? All right. Anybody in the public wishing to address this item? I see no hand in chambers online.
None online, Mayor.
In that case, I'll accept a motion.
Okay, I move that we adopt resolution 2023-110, approving the memorandum of understanding between Lincoln Police and Fire Mid-Management and Supervisory Employee Group.
Good enough. All
I
right.
second.
Sorry, Bill, was that a second?
That was a second. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Andriana,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yes.
and Mayor Joyner.
Yes. All right, that largely completes our agenda. We'll very quickly move through the city managers' reports.
Or
not so quickly.
No. Just two really fast things. We will be bringing you your 23 through 25 operational budget next meeting. Just finished the finishing touches on some budget narratives today, so it's ready to go. We're excited to present that. Secondly, is just a really quick thing that was a tease. Jen sat in on a really neat program that Verizon has called the Digital Inclusion Program. And it is a program that I'm not educated enough on to speak, but in broad strokes that we're trying to work through currently. And it kind of relates to rates in a way. It allows cities to work out a deal with Verizon where we can provide seed funding for people that qualify, and you set the qualifying parameters as city council. So for example, let's say low-income seniors to either get very, very low cost cell service, including unlimited data for like a $20 a month fee, or a hotspot kind of internet connectivity through their network for a very, very, very low fee. And so we're looking into how that might work and whether it might be something that certain members of our community could find to be useful. Figure you go to Verizon and you sign up for a smartphone, you're probably paying $100 for your bill. This is a program that was designed to sort of drive down that cost, and they've given it to essentially local jurisdictions to try to figure out whether or not there's interest. So Jen's working on it, and we're eventually going to flush it out and see if there's potentially a limited program that we could put together that might provide some relief to people in the community that might need that help. So stay tuned.
Good. We'll move on to council initiated business. Anyone have any council initiated business tonight? No. All right. Committee reports, start on my left.
No, I haven't been to a meeting, so I will next council.
I've had one, the WAPA meeting, and there's really no reportable action.
That's fine.
Well, no, that's not true. There was a status given by the general manager. We're in the process as an organization of defining or changing their governance structure, which is like the general manager in county and is part-time, and several people in the organization are that way. Given the magnitude of what's going on as far as the new regulatory system and 1383, the new plant coming online, there's been I guess a feeling that it should have a dedicated general manager, not that who's not necessarily a city county employee, just reports to the board of directors. So they're mechanizing that because it then requires other changes in the organization. And they should have a report out on how that's going to work, what it's going to cost sometime in the next few months. But that was the status.
Good, good. That's been long overdue. I think it actually puts staff in a bit of an awkward position. They get their paycheck from the county. And so that duality of loyalty, and where we first had to address it was that counsel for the county was negotiating agreements on behalf of Western Placer Waste Management with the county. And highly inappropriate.
And then there were,
What was that?
yeah, and then there were also lawsuits between the county.
So long overdue. I'm glad to see that that's coming. Anything else?
That's it. It's
All
the only
right.
meeting.
So I attended the retreat for the Greater Sacramento Economic Development Council, and I'll just do this very high level. They are in the midst of their 10th year, and as a result of that, they are beginning to have conversations about succession of leadership. A lot of their initial founding members, investors are stepping away. What does that mean for the next generation? Where is the organization heading? They're also considering a rebrand. They've hired a firm roughly $250,000 to take a hard look at the brand, see if it is appropriate to rebrand and what that might look like. This was a really impressive stat, I thought. Over those 10 years, they've managed to increase investment capital available in our region by 700%. That's huge. With a lot of these things, as you all know, sometimes it's the conversations that take place in the breaks and in the networking sessions are far more important than the actual sessions themselves. And one of those was, I think, unintended. There was a discussion of what is in the way of businesses prospering. Almost many of the bigger investors and CEOs on the board are Sacramento. And so they tend to focus on that. And obviously, one of their biggest challenges is homelessness. And so there was a very lengthy conversation about that. And without specifying who, one of the new healthcare representatives in the room said, you know, the state has given $50 billion to address homelessness over several years. And it hasn't really done a whole lot of good. Why doesn't the state give that money to us as healthcare, the folks who deal with mental health issues, who deal with addiction issues, and let us address that? I think that was a little bit of an unintended door kicked open because a whole lot of folks in the room suddenly thought, I didn't know that was even a possibility they'd be willing to do that. And so I'm certainly going to have conversations with that individual on a local level as we stand up our pilot program and see if they can't offer some resources there. But I think that it's probably going to lead to a much broader conversation regionally. I think that's a good partner to bring on board, Holly, for this homeless, whatever we're calling it, planning group that we both sit on. There is an absence of the healthcare profession in the room. And so I'm going to invite her to that next meeting and see if we can't spur some more conversation around that. Well, I will say this. She said, you know what? We gave $5 million to the city of Sacramento to address homelessness. We have no idea where that money went. And that really, as you might guess, isn't working for them. They'd like to be able to track it, be involved in it. And so I think that's a great opportunity and one we ought to run down. That's all I have to report. We'll move on to information items. Anybody got an information item? Okay, staff? No one? That's our last item. With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you all. It was a long one.
Yeah, thank you, staff.